Hello, welcome to another crochet tutorial video. I'm so glad you're here. Today we are going to be working on the Runic tunic. So I have several of the supplies laid out here for you. So I'm going to walk you through everything you're going to need. So first of all, because it's the Runic tunic, I thought very appropriate that I have these little figurines here. These, if you don't recognize them, are Brock and Sindri. They are the dwarves from the God of War series, the more recent ones with like the Norse gods and everything. I thought, how appropriate. Anglo-Saxon and Viking culture had a lot of like overlap and things like that. So, I thought those were just kind of fun and cute to throw in there. Anyway, now moving on to the actual serious supplies, we've got yarn. So I am going to be using the Viking Fiber Company. This is their Nornir Base DK. This is a non-superwash wool, and it is a mix of merino, Corriedale, and gray Romney sheep wool. And this is an indie dyer out of Colorado. So there will be links in the description box for where you can make your own purchases of your yarn here. I'm using the color Odin's Ravens and Tyr's Sacrifice. So this is my main color and this is my accent color. So you're going to need two colors to be able to do this. You'll also, of course, need a hook. The one that I will be using is going to be my size F hook. So that is a 3.75 millimeter hook. That just was the one that I used to get like a good gauge for me. But I know that, some people that might be a little small. And so some of you can actually get away with using a 4 millimeter hook. This is, my Furls Streamline in the Camwood. And this is my Lether Co. hand-turned hook from Lether Company. You'll also need a measuring tape of some kind because we're making a garment. You are going to want to make sure that you're getting good measurements to make sure it's the right fit for whoever you might be making this for, whether it's yourself or a loved one. You'll also need some scissors. We will be doing some cutting of yarn, of course. You will need some yarn needles or a yarn needle. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's done in a lot of very separate sections and pieces, but there's absolutely no seaming in this entire piece. So the only thing you'll be using this for is weaving in yarn ends. So good, have fun with that. I love the fact that there's no seams in this. You'll also maybe want a few stitch markers because there will be places where we'll be working in rounds. And so it's easy to mark the beginning and end of round to make sure you're seeing where you begin and end. Plus also there will be a couple of places where we'll be doing some splitting and some joining and things like that. And marking where our locations are for those is a lot easier than trying to, count as we stitch. The final thing I have here is my book that I use for tracking rows and rounds. So any method you use to track your rows and rounds will be fine. I just like to make sure you know, making sure that you're paying attention to increase patterns and how you need to grow and shrink things and everything like that. So with all of those supplies in hand, you are now ready to get started. So let's begin with the hem flaps. One of the important things you need to do is make sure you make a gauge swatch to see how many inches and stitches you're going to need. And so that way you can make sure that you're matching gauge as best as possible so that you can follow the instructions and get the right size. So what you'll do is make up a gauge swatch. The main stitch being used here is called a herringbone double crochet. Later in the video, I do talk about the steps to making it, but just know that in the pattern, it does walk you through that as well. So you'll make a big square like this. And what you'll do is you'll just pick a series of stitches. So if I zoom in here, you can see that each of these herringbone double crochets is slanted and has kind of like a gap in between them. So just kind of pick the top or bottom of one of those or kind of like the middle, and then just kind of start there. And then every post, all right, let me see here. Every post and space counts as one single stitch because the stitch is taking up that much space before the next stitch takes it up. So if you count, you would go 1 for this post and space, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., until you reach 4 inches or 10 centimeters to see how many stitches are inside of those 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Then you would do the same thing when you measure the rows. So we can see that they are creating kind of these little bump ridges right here. Each one of those counts as 2 rows because you've got one of the rows going this direction and the other one going this direction, and then it starts back over. So I just kind of find the bottom of one of those and kind of line it up here. And then you again count that each ridge to the bottom of the next ridge is 2 rows. So that's going to be 2, 4, 6, etc. And you do that all the way to 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And for this pattern, my gauge came out to be 32 herringbone double crochet stitches wide for 4 inches, and then 33 rows tall for 4 inches. So it's almost a perfect square. So if you can get as close as you can to that gauge, you should be good on the measurements of your Runic tunic. Our Runic tunic begins with 2 hem flaps that we will make separately. So to do that, what you're going to do is start by putting a slip knot on your hook. And then in your pattern, based on your size, it's going to tell you to chain a number of chains. So I'm going to go ahead and do that myself here. So there we go. And then once you get the number of chains listed, meet me back here and I will show you the next step in making your hem flap. I just finished working up the chains that I needed. So now what we're going to do is work our first row, and that's going to be a row of herringbone double crochets. So to start the row off, we have to do what's called a beginning herringbone double crochet. So to do that, what we're going to do is work in our second chain from our hook. We'll insert, grab a loop, and just pull it through everything. So we're essentially just working a slip stitch to start. And then once we do that, we're going to chain 1, and then through the top of our slip stitch through this front loop, we're going to insert our hook again, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2. Now that may seem like a lot of steps, and I'm not going to lie, it kind of is, but if you think of it almost like if you do a slip stitch and then you stack an extended single crochet on top, then that's essentially what we just did. So it's kind of like a modified stacked single crochet, if you're familiar with that, with starting off with double crochets. So what this does is it allows the stitch here to kind of mimic how the herringbone double crochet will look as far as the lean and then where like the yarn overs are going to appear. And we'll see that here in a moment once you actually see what the herringbone double crochet looks like. So now that we've worked our beginning herringbone double crochet in that first chain, we're going to work into the next chain a herringbone double crochet. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that chain, and then with a normal double crochet, we would yarn over and pull through just that chain. But for a herringbone, we need to pull through this chain and this first loop that's on our hook. So I'm going to pull through the chain and the first loop on our hook at the same time. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through just the first loop here, and then yarn over and pull through both loops that are on our hook. And if we kind of set it back down here, we can see that the stitch has a little bit of a lean, so it's leaning to the left, and this beginning one is also leaning to the left, just like this one. So that way it kind of mimics that lean that you'll see in most herringbone knitting patterns. Let's get back out here. So let's work the next herringbone double crochet. So we'll yarn over, go into our next chain, insert, and pull a loop through the chain and the first loop on our hook there. Then we will yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's our second herringbone double crochet created. And we see that it's leaning just like the other. So that's exactly what a herringbone double crochet does, is it causes all the stitches to lean one way. Then when we go on the second row, they're going to lean the opposite way, and it creates that herringbone look going horizontally. So here we go. So let's work another one together. So yarn over, insert into our chain, pull a loop through the chain and the first loop on our hook, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's essentially all you're doing for the remainder of row 1 of the hem flaps, is working herringbone double crochets into every chain across. So I'm going to go ahead and work that off camera, and I will get back to you when it's time to work row 2. I'm finishing up the last stitch of my row 1. And there we go. And now row 1 is done. So one thing I'd like to recommend that you do at this point is because row 1 represents our right side. That's going to be very important later when it comes to joining our hem flaps. What I suggest is taking a stitch marker and going ahead and marking that this is the right side of our work. So that way when we turn it, we know, oh, the side with the stitch marker is the right side. So that's going to help us for later. Now that we've done that, we can begin row 2. So for row 2, we're going to turn our work. And in this very first stitch, we're going to work a beginning herringbone double crochet. So as a reminder, what that is you'll work a slip stitch into the first stitch. Then we will chain 1. And then going through the top and through the front loop of this slip stitch, we'll insert our hook, pull up a loop, pull through 1 loop here, and then pull through 2 loops. And we've got our beginning herringbone double crochet done. Then in the next stitch, we will just work a regular herringbone double crochet. And then you just work herringbone double crochets into each stitch all the way across for row 2. So I'll go ahead and work that off camera, and then I will meet you back up for row 3, which will be our very first increase row. And all right, so now that we're at the last stitch of the row, we're going to turn our work. And now we're going to do our first increase. So to do an increase, essentially what we're doing is just working 2 stitches into the beginning and the end of each side so that it will taper outwards and get bigger and wider. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll work our beginning herringbone double crochet into our very first stitch. And then in the exact same stitch, we're going to work another herringbone double crochet. And that's all there is to increasing at the beginning. Then you will just herringbone double crochet in each of the other stitches across until you reach the last stitch. Then in the very last stitch, right here, we're going to work 2 herringbone double crochets. So there's 1 and 2 into that same stitch. So now our stitch count should have increased by 2, 1 on each side. So that's essentially what you're going to repeat for the remainder of the rows listed in your pattern. Is you're going to do 2 rows of herringbone double crochet like normal, and then 1 row of increasing, 2 in the beginning, 2 in the end. And you do that for however many rows it lists for your pattern. You'll do that for both hem flaps. Once you have both hem flaps worked up, meet me back up and we'll talk about how to join those. I have now completed both of my hem flaps, so I've got the right side marked for each one of them with a stitch marker. That'll be very important when it comes to lining them up for joining. So before we join, what we need to do is decide which one of these will be our back hem flap. It doesn't really matter which one, they're both identical, but just pick one, and that's going to be the one that will be our back. And then what you need to do is find the center. So I'll find the center 2 stitches. One of the easiest ways to do that is by taking your last row that you did, taking that total, divide by 2, and that's going to tell you how many stitches will need to be on either side of the center. So I'm going to do that and find that this is going to be my center of my row. So it's going to be these 2 stitches here. And what I want to do is insert my hook into the one just to the left. So then that way my first stitch is on the left side because we'll be going in this direction. And then my last stitch will be the last one right here. Now, if you're left-handed and working the opposite direction, all you do is just stick your hook into the one on the right, since you'll be going to the right with your stitches. So in either case, you'll find those 2 center stitches, select the one that's going to be your starting stitch, and then we will join it with a slip stitch. So I'm going to grab my yarn here, And join it with a slip stitch. I like to do a slip knot just for extra security here. Grab my yarn, just pull it through, and then tighten it. Okay. And then once we tighten, we're going to do a chain 1 to secure. So this is the only time we're going to do a chain 1 at the beginning of a round. All the other rounds, we're just going to do a normal beginning herringbone double crochet. So the first thing we'll do, of course, like I just said, is a herringbone double crochet, a beginning herringbone double crochet into the same stitch that we just joined into, since that will count as our first stitch. So to do that, we will insert our hook into that stitch, pull up our loop through everything to create our slip stitch. Then we'll chain 1, go back in through the top of our slip stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. And then what will be a good idea is to go ahead and mark this stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a stitch marker here and put it into my first stitch, just so I have a visual reminder that that is the first stitch of the round. Thankfully, because these are pretty tall stitches, it'll be easy to tell when you reach the end of your round, but just in case, I always like to go ahead and do that anyway. All right, so then what you're going to do is work herringbone double crochets into the top of each stitch all the way across. So we'll do a herringbone double crochet into our next stitch, and then in each stitch all the way across. And then once we get there, I will show you how to join the second hem flap to the front. I'm just about to reach the very last stitch of my row. Goes through both of those loops of the V. There we go. And now what we need to do is continue by working into the second flap. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So I've got my second flap here. We want to make sure we find where our right side is, so the side with the stitch marker marking it. And we're going to flip it to where the right side lines up on the opposite side. So we've got the right side facing us right now of our current hem flap. This is our right side currently. And then when we turn it, we want to see the right side of this flap, because this is going to work as the outside of our garment. So when we turn to start working herringbone double crochets into the front flap, we want to make sure that the right side is what is facing out to us. So now that we've done that, I'm just going to work a herringbone double crochet into this very first stitch. So I want to make sure I find where that first stitch is. It's actually, I think that was the final pull through. Yeah, okay. So this is actually my final stitch. This was when I had the extra yarn tail and I was sewing it in. That's what this is. So my actual first starting stitch is this V right here. So I'm going to work a herringbone double crochet through that V. It's a little loose there, so let me try again. You want to make sure you try to hold everything nice and tense, so that way the stitch stays uniform. There we go. All right. And now that I've done that, I've connected at this corner between the two hem flaps. So now I can just continue working herringbone double crochets into all the stitches across our front hem flap. And then once we work all of these herringbone double crochets across our front, we're going to get to the corner here and we do the exact same thing that I just showed you here, where you'll work your final herringbone double crochet in this stitch. Then you'll turn and work your next herringbone double crochet into the first stitch of this side. Then you'll continue working herringbone double crochets all the way until you reach the beginning of the round. So that's going to take you a little bit of work, but go ahead and work that up. I will do that off camera, but then I will come back when I'm here to show you how to join at the beginning of your round. Throughout this video, I was using the old technique that I had done for the invisible join, and I actually figured out that there was a way I preferred the look of. It was a little bit more secure. It didn't leave as much of a gap. And so I've decided I wanted to insert that here to make a correction, and so it fits more with the updated pattern version. So any other time that I do the invisible join in the rest of this video, just ignore how I'm doing it there. You'll just do it exactly as I do here. So regardless of what kind of stitch you're working, whether it's a herringbone double crochet or a half double crochet or anything like that, once you get to your final stitch of the round, like this one, you're going to work it until you're about to do your final yarn over and pull through. So for a herringbone double crochet, it's after you do your chain, your pull through one loop. For a half double crochet, it's after you yarn, it's after for a half double crochet, it's after you've pulled up your loop and you have 3 loops on your hook. In either case, what you're going to do is take your hook and go behind your working yarn and the stitches that you're working. You're going to go through the back of the first stitch under both loops. You're not just going to go under one, you're going to go under both. You're going to grab the yarn, the active loop, and pull it through that stitch and all the loops that were on your hook. And then just kind of tighten that down. Not too tight, but definitely tight to secure. Then what you'll do is you'll turn your work counterclockwise. So then that way our active loop is coming to the front, or our active yarn is coming through the front, because then what we do is when we work our next stitch, whether it's a half double crochet or a beginning herringbone double crochet, we can kind of hide this active yarn inside of our stitch. So for example, in this one, if I do a herringbone double crochet to start, I'm going to actually insert my hook into that first stitch and then pull up a loop to slip stitch to do my beginning herringbone double crochet, and it just tucks that right in there. And it's not exactly the most invisible. I don't think there's ever going to be a truly invisible way to join and turn rounds in crochet unless I just, don't know about it. But this I found to be a lot better than the method that I was using before. So I went ahead and changed that in the pattern and subsequently changed it in this video. So just so you're aware that when you see me do the quote unquote invisible join in all the other segments of this video, just ignore how I'm doing it that way. Just do it the way that I just showed you, working the final pull through as a back reverse slip stitch basically through this stitch. All right, there we go. About that. This next joining round is pretty much just like the first one. You're just going to be working herringbone double crochets into every stitch around. Then when you get back around to the beginning, you do that invisible join, turn, and then you are ready to work the body. To work the body of your tunic, this is honestly going to be the most meditative, easiest part of this entire pattern. So definitely appreciate and enjoy it as much as you can before we get into the yoke and sleeves where it gets a little bit more on the complicated side. But a couple of things I do want to point out for tips. One is that I would recommend using stitch markers to mark the first and last stitch of each round. Even though it's pretty obvious when you meet the beginning, sometimes it can be hard to tell where your last stitch is to work into before needing to do your join. So I go ahead and just mark the first stitch every time I do a new round, which automatically means that it marks the last stitch of the round before. So that's definitely something I recommend doing, is stitch marking those places. The other thing, of course, is to have a way of tracking your rounds, because you are going to be working a long number of rounds with no changes, no decreases, no increases, nothing like that. It can become easy to lose your spots. So what I have here is my method for myself is I basically list out how many rounds that I need. And then I do, like every 10 rounds or so. And that way I can be like, okay, so 38 means I need 40 of them minus 2. So this would be 50. So I X out all of those. So that leaves me with 40. And I X out 2 of those. And that leaves me with 38. Do like a little underline thing. So that's just my method. So every time I hit a new round, I go ahead and check mark it, do a little dot or something like that. And that helps me keep track here. As you can see, I kind of messed up somewhere earlier, so I had to start it completely over. But anyway, so that's my method of doing that. But obviously use whatever method you really want to keep track of your rounds. Now, the other tip I want to give is that this is the part where it can become customizable to how long you want the tunic to be, either for yourself or whoever you might be making this for. So because it's bottom up, that is a little trickier to try to customize without fully knowing, like the fit up at the top. But you can still at least figure out where the length is going to hit by setting it underneath the underarm and go down by about an inch or two, because it's going to naturally kind of sit a little bit below our underarm. Then wherever it's sitting, where the bottom of the tunic is falling, that's likely where it's going to be hitting when the garment is actually worn. So if you're like, that's a great length, you can actually go ahead and stop. You don't have to do the exact number of rounds that I list in the pattern. The only thing is that you want to make sure you end on a wrong side round, so an even numbered round, because on the next part, when we do the split, we're going to be doing that on the right side. So make sure that whatever length you do, if you customize it, that you end on the wrong side. Now, go ahead and take some time, get yourself a, nice Netflix show, some coffee or whatever favorite beverage you want, and then have some fun working up the body of your tunic. And then I will meet you back to talk about how to split for the sleeves. I have now finished working the body of my tunic and I'm ready to split for the sleeves. So to split for the sleeves, the instructions will say to work a beginning herringbone double crochet plus some stitches. Then you're going to chain a certain number, skip 6, and then join back and continue working. So what I do ahead of time is I actually go ahead and count out the stitches that I need and then use stitch markers to indicate where I'm going to be splitting. So here I am always skipping 6 stitches. So I marked the first and then the 6th stitch that's going to be skipped with my stitch markers. So I know that I need to work to this very last stitch right before this stitch marker. Then I'll do my split with my chain. And then I did that, of course, on the other side as well. It's just easier for me, so that way I'm not having to count and keep track and all of that stuff. I just do that ahead of time, make it easier for myself. So we'll go ahead and start in our first stitch with our beginning herringbone double crochet. And then of course we'll want to mark that stitch just so that we know it's the first stitch of the round. And there we go. And then I'll just herringbone double crochet into every stitch until I get to my stitch marker. So I'll go ahead and work that off camera, and then I will join you back to show you how to do the split. All right, I've just now reached this last stitch before the stitch marker, so I'm going to just work my final herringbone double crochet. And then in your pattern, it'll tell you to chain a certain number of chains depending on your size. So all you do from here is just chain whatever that is. So in this case, I'm going to chain 52. So 1, 2, 3, 49, 50, 51, 52. And then being careful that I'm not like twisting the chain or anything like that, we're then going to skip these 6 stitches that I stitch marked and find this next stitch, and we're just going to work our next herringbone double crochet into that one. So we will do that by, of course, yarning over and holding our loops on our loops on our hook, so then that way they don't twist and turn or anything. Get nice and close to the stitch, insert into that stitch just past our stitch marker, pull a loop through that stitch and the loop that was yarned over earlier. And then we will yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. So we should now have the number of chains that we needed earlier, plus the ones that we worked before and the ones we're about to work. So now we've basically increased it by however many chains minus 6. So in this case, we've increased our stitch count by, well, 52 minus 6 should be 46. So I've now increased it by 46 stitches. So that's going to start off our yoke. So now I'm going to keep going. You'll work herringbone double crochets into all the stitches across the front of the chest. And then once you do, you're just going to repeat exactly what you just did on the opposite side. Then after that, you'll work herringbone double crochets all the way until you reach the beginning. And that will be the first round of our split. So I'm going to go ahead and work that off camera. And then I will join you back when it's time to work the second round of our split. I just finished joining the round, and so now I'm ready to start the next round of the split. And what this one is actually going to be what's called the rune band setup. But before I talk about that, I want to just note something here, that when I did my chain, I went ahead and left my stitch markers here, so then that way later when I go back to work the sleeves, these stitches are a lot easier to find, because once I start working into these, sometimes it can be a little difficult to tell where a stitch is here when it's time for me to join for sleeves. Just, another tip for you to make it easier for you in the future. So the rune band setup round is going to work just half double crochets in every stitch around. So unlike the herringbone double crochets, these are just normal half double crochets. So in my very first stitch, without any chaining, I'm just going to yarn over, insert my hook into this first stitch, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 3, normal half double crochet. And then I'll go ahead and mark that stitch as my first stitch of the round. And get it underneath those loops. Okay, there we go, that's good. And then I just work a half double crochet into each stitch and chain around. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera until I get to the actual chain, and then I'll show you how to work into the chains. I'm getting close now to the chains, so one thing to note is that as you're approaching it, the last stitch you'll be working in is going to be this herringbone double crochet that's right here. And so you'll kind of find the V that's at the top of it. That's going to be the last stitch we work in before we start working into chains. So I have 3 more half double crochets to work. And now it's time to work into the chains. So here is just kind of like my general advice is that it doesn't really matter how you work into the chains. You could work into this V, you could work into the back bump, you could work into underneath both loops and leave just the bump there. It doesn't really matter as long as you have the exact same number of stitches as you do chains. So earlier I said that I had 52 chains. So as long as I have 52 half double crochets before I start working into my first herringbone double crochet on the other side, which will be this stitch right here, then I should be good. So I'm going to personally choose to just kind of turn it to where, let's see, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? Maybe let's work into the back bumps, so then that way we get a nice V for when we work the sleeves later. That might be helpful. So I'll find this first back bump right here, and then I'm going to work a half double crochet into that. So I've done my yarn over. I'll go into that back bump. If I can get it in there. There we go. Once I do that, just yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. And then I find the next back bump, which will be this one right here. And then I'll just work a half double crochet into that one. So I'm going to do that in every back bump that I see. So there's 3. And I'll do that for all of my chains all the way across. And then I'll just start working half double crochets into this first stitch and then the next one all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and work across these chains, across all of these stitches, across all the chains on the other sleeve, and then all the way back around to the beginning. And then I'll show you how to do the invisible join with the half double crochet when I get to that point. So go ahead and work yours up while I work mine off camera, and then I'll join you back up to show you that. Here I've come all the way around, and I'm about to be in my last stitch. So to do the invisible join with the half double crochet, it's just like with the herringbone double crochet, where we will work our stitch until our final yarn over. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into our stitch, pull up our loop, and then for a half double crochet, this would be our final yarn over, is pulling this yarn through these 3 loops. So before I do that, all I do is go through and find the V of the first half double crochet, and I'll go through the center of that to go through the back loop only. There we go. Make sure I'm just going through the back loop. There we go. All right. Okay, so I got that. It's through the back loop, and then I will yarn over and pull through that back loop and all 3 loops on my hook, and we've just done an invisible join with the half double crochet. And now we are all done with the split. So now that we've done the split, we're ready to start the rune band of our yoke. Now what we're going to do is, for the first round of our rune band, we are going to work half double crochets in the back loop only. So I'll go ahead and turn my work here. Get that ready. So when we work in the back loop, we're going to look at the top here and see that we have our V of our stitch. So that's our front loop and our back loop. So we're going to yarn over and go through just the back loop of our stitch and work a half double crochet. And then I will go ahead and mark that stitch as the first one of the round. And then I'll just do that in every single stitch around. So yarn over, go through the back loop of our next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Once I get a half double crochet in every back loop around, I will then join at the end using my invisible join. So I'm going to go ahead and work all of my half double crochets in the back loop only, all the way around, and then I will meet you up to show you what to do for the next round. I'm approaching the very last stitch of my round. So in this one, I'm going to work the final half double crochet in the back loop only. So I'll remove my stitch marker, yarn over, find this back loop, which if I turn it towards me, you can see is going to be this loop that it, get out of the way yarn, is going to be this loop right here. So I'll go ahead and yarn over, go through just that back loop. And there we go. Yarn over, pull up a loop. And now I'm about to do the invisible join. So I need to find my first stitch, go through that back loop, you can see it's not super easy for me. So if you're struggling with this part of it, it's okay. We we all do. There are parts of a pattern that sometimes are not easy for anybody. So there we go. All right. So now that we've joined those, we're now ready for the next round of our rune band. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. Okay. And now for this one, we're going to work in what is called the third loop of the half double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here so we can see how a half double crochet is structured. So if you'll look at the top of your stitches, you'll see that every half double crochet, and really just any crochet stitch itself, always has this V stitch at the top. So we've got our back loop and our front loop. But then if you turn the half double crochet away from you, we can see that the yarn over that we use to make the half double crochet creates this extra bit here. That is the third loop of the half double crochet. So that's actually going to be what we will work in for this round. So we'll work a half double crochet into the third loop. So I'll yarn over, find that third loop of my half double crochet, going underneath it, we'll go through the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. And that's the first half double crochet of this round. So I'll go ahead and place my stitch marker here. And then I will find the next half double crochet and the third loop for it. So the next half double crochet is going to be this one right here. So there's the third loop. So we will yarn over, go through that third loop, going underneath it, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. And I just keep repeating that into every half double crochet across. Go through the third loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Now, one of the cool things about working in the third loop of the half double crochet is that because of where we're placing this stitch, it's actually pushing that top V of the stitch away from us. So since we're on the wrong side of our work, what this is doing is pushing the V's to the right side of the work. And I'll show you what it looks like on the other side once I have a few done here. I'll go ahead and pull my hook out, mark this stitch so that it doesn't come loose, and then I'll flip it over here. Okay, so we can see that as it's pushing this V forward, it's actually creating this little chain that looks like it's around, it's going to look like it's going around and framing our work. So we had the stitches worked in the back loop only in the previous round, so it creates kind of a little bit of a V right here. It's not as defined, but it will look pretty cool still. And then this one really is more prominent because it's worked through the back loop and then you've got the third loop. So it's really pushing that V forward to create that nice textured frame for our rune band. So what you're going to do now that you know what to do for this part is you're just going to work in a half double crochet into every third loop of the half double crochets below. Go all the way around and then we'll do the invisible join. But before you do the final invisible join, we're actually going to be doing a color change. So I'll go ahead and work this round, working in the third loop only, all the way around off camera. Then I will meet you back to talk to you about how to do the color change. I'm coming now to the last stitch of my round, so I'm going to go ahead and work these last couple of half double crochets in the third loop. So it might be a little harder to see, but this one that my stitch marker is marking, the third loop is this loop that's right here. So it's going to be this one. It'll be the last third loop that I work into. Which is giving me way more trouble than it has any business doing. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, got it in. And then what we'll do is we'll pull up our loop. And now we're about to do our invisible join. Now the thing about this invisible join though is that because we're about to do a new color, we're going to be switching to our accent color here. So we're going to be getting that ready. In crochet, one thing about color work is that when we are changing, because of how the loops at the top of our stitches kind of lean over to look like they're on top of the next stitch, we actually need to finish this stitch with this new color. So what I'll do is go ahead and take this stitch marker out. Okay. I'll find the first stitch of the round here, go through the back loop just like I would to do my invisible join. Then instead of yarning over with this yarn, which actually be a good idea, go ahead and put that here to the wrong side. Sorry, I forgot. Since this is the wrong side, we want to make sure we keep the working strands to the wrong side so that way they're hidden when we do the color work. Okay, now that I've done that, now we can go through the center, going through the back loop of that stitch, grabbing our new color here, just laying that across the hook with enough of a tail to weave in later. And then we will finish our stitch by going through all of these loops. Oops. Going through all of these loops with our new color. Definitely take your time with this. There's no need to rush it. Kind of maybe just like tighten, tighten. Okay. And then once we do that, we are now ready to turn. Pull that color here. It's time to start working the actual rune section. So here's the thing. I'm not going to be able to go through every single rune instruction. There are individual instructions for each one, but I am going to tell you a couple of main tips. So the first thing is that all of round 1 and 2 instructions for each rune are the same. They're all just half double crochet around and then join and then turn around and half double crochet back, all in this contrasting color. In the meantime, we just let this main color kind of hang out here because we'll be bringing that back in later when we start working round 3. So what we'll be doing is in both loops now, because we'll no longer be working in the back loop or the front loop or the third loop, we're going to be working both loops. We will start by just working half double crochets into every stitch across. So I'm going to yarn over with my new color, insert into this very first stitch. Sometimes I like to go ahead and just work over my tail, just one, just to kind of secure it. Not all the way because I prefer just weaving that in later instead of working around the whole thing. Yes, we'll do a half double crochet here. Okay. And then I will, oh, I tightened that a bit too much here. Let me undo that. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. Half double crochet. And then I will mark this stitch with my stitch marker so that I know that this is the first stitch of the round. And there we go. Okay. And then I just proceed to half double crochet in every stitch around. All right, so then basically what you'll do is just work half double crochets all the way around, invisible join when you get back to here at the join, turn, half double crochet, same color all the way around, making sure you're keeping your 2 yarns here to the back, to the wrong side. Then after that, I will go ahead and meet you up and talk to you about how to plan out your actual runes for your rune band and then some tips on what to do there. So when it comes to planning out your runes, what you can do is it's just like if you were doing like an alphabet version, but each rune basically acts like its own letter, and each one is going to have its own instructions that are over here. And this is where you get really creative and decide, how do you want to arrange them? So what I do is I provide you information about the rune, what is it actually called? What was the word that it stood for? What sound it made in original like Old English, and then what is its kind of modern equivalent, at least as close as possible as you can get. So if you wanted to write like, modern words but using the runes, you could do that. If you want to write, original Old English words, you could do that too. So towards the end of the pattern, I have, some suggested words here. I also have some suggested phrases depending on how much space you might have. So then what you would do is you would figure out, once you have your rune blocks. So for instance, like I have 33 rune blocks available to me. So what I can do is I can be like, okay, so I can do divide this by 3. So I could have like a 3-letter word that's repeated over and over. I could divide this by 11 and have like an 11-letter word or 11-letter phrase or something like that. You also don't necessarily have to have spaces between them. So if you wanted to have something like the word like, joy, you could, find the equivalent runes and write them out. So I don't exactly remember which rune is which, but I think like this one is, so you do like whatever the J rune is. Or you could have a bunch of random runes that you just decide, hey, these runes had meanings like, I like the one that means horse or the one that means hammer or something like that, and have that wrapped around. So I'm going to show you that like, what I've done for my version is I was like, I need 11 letters. So I actually did a 3-letter word and a 5-letter word and then another 3-letter word. And then that together makes 11 letters. And so then I'll just repeat that 3 times. So by setting this out, you then can figure out how you need to do the rest of the pattern for your rune band. So, I'm not going to be able to walk you through obviously every step or every possible combination, but I am going to, in the next clip, just show you some tips for working the Colorworks part using the runes that I have as an example. All right, one of my first tips is to actually go ahead and write out every single rune that you're wanting. And then if you want to indicate any sort of spaces, you can maybe do like a dash or like a, something like an underscore. I'm not using any spaces, so all of mine are just going to run together. So if there is any spacing, it was just incidental. But once you write it all out and you decide how you want to arrange it, you need to remember that when you're following the instructions, you're going to be going from right to left. So as we're working these runes, we're going right to left because we're starting with the back of our tunic and we're on the right side, and we're working our way around the back and then the shoulder, and then we're coming around the chest, back around the next shoulder, and then back around to the back. And then the wrong side rows or rounds are always just worked as half double crochets in our contrasting color. So the only time we're making any of these types of shapes are on the right side. So we're always going that same direction. We're going to work the color work using fair isle techniques. What that means is that we're going to be carrying the different colored yarns on the back of our work, so on the wrong side, and then just dropping and changing colors as we need as we go. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first one is that we're going to work our half double crochet in the contrasting color. That's going to be true for pretty much every one of the runes. And then depending on the individual rune instruction, what you'll do is then you'll work however many that you need in this contrasting color. But before I move on to that, what I'm actually going to do is pick up my main color and I'm going to have it ready so that when I yarn over and insert into this stitch, I'm going to go ahead and place that main color over my hook and then finish with my contrasting color here. Because what that does is it grabs that strand of yarn and it pulls it up to the level that I need it to be at. Now you don't want to make this too tight because that might cinch in your fabric, but overall, this is going to keep it from just being this big, loose, dangly thing, because for me, my first rune is not going to use this main color until way over here, and I don't want to pull that yarn all the way over there the first time I work with it. So I go ahead and I grab it here. A general rule is that you don't need to grab this yarn and secure it to the back every time, but definitely don't do it more than 3 stitches across. So here I'm about to do my 3rd stitch there. And then my next one is still going to be in the contrasting color. So I'm going to go ahead and work it, but because we've already got 3 stitches here, I want to go ahead and grab that main color, lay it over my hook, and then finish with my contrasting color just to secure it to the back. And it doesn't show on the front here, so we still don't see that main color popping through. It's still all staying to the back, but it's giving it these nice little anchor points to keep our yarn from just being this big, long, loose, dangly thing in the back. Okay, so now that I've worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, my next one is going to be my 7th one, but now on the 8th one, it's telling me for this rune instruction that I need to now work a front post double crochet using the main color. So all of your runes are going to be worked in our main color when we do our post stitches. So what I'm going to do is, before finishing this stitch, this half double crochet, I'm going to drop that color, pick up my main color, and finish the stitch with my main color. Because as you can see here, this loop that's on my hook is not actually the top of this stitch, it was this loop here. So in order to keep the color work changes clean, we want to make sure we always end our final stitch of one color with pulling through the new color. So now that I've done that, it says to work the front post double crochet around a half double crochet 2 rows below. Now, because crochet doesn't line up exactly perfectly, as long as you can kind of eyeball where it looks like it'll be straight down, that will be good enough. So what I'll do is I'll yarn over. This would be the stitch I would normally work into. So I'm just going to kind of drop 2 rows below there. It's going to be this first half double crochet here. I'm going to do a front post double crochet. So that means I'm going to go through the front and come out the back around the post of that stitch, yarn over, pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And then I would normally yarn over and pull through 2. But now what I need to do is switch back to my contrasting color. So what I'll do is, before I finish this stitch, drop the main color, pick up my contrasting color, and finish it like so. Making sure you're always keeping your floats, which is what these strands of yarn that we're not using are, to the back. And now I can go ahead and move to the next one. So those are my main tips for the colorwork section. As far as following actual rune instructions, I won't be able to show you absolutely every single rune instruction, especially since a lot of them use very similar instructions. And so showing you like how to do certain runes, I'd be like, a lot of it's the same. So what I am going to show you though are a couple of the main stitches that you're going to encounter and how you might work them. So one of the biggest ones that you're going to see a lot of is the front post double crochet. So a front post double crochet is just like a regular double crochet, only worked around the post of a stitch. So you're going to yarn over, find the stitch that you're going to be working around. So whether that's a half double crochet or another post stitch like what I've got over here, you're going to go through the front of the stitch, then around the back, going around the post of it, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then you would normally yarn over and pull through 2. Depending on if you need to change colors, you would use the new strand or whatever. But in either case, I'm just going to go ahead and just pull it through. So that is a front post double crochet. Another type of stitch you might encounter is the front post treble crochet. So just like the front post double, it's worked exactly the same way. You just do an extra yarn over to do the treble crochet. So you'll yarn over twice, find whatever post it might indicate, go around the post, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then you would yarn over with whatever color you need to, pull through 2 on that last one. Then you have the front post double treble crochet. That's exactly the same as the first two. You're just doing one more yarn over. So you can probably see a little pattern going here. So we've got yarn over 3 times, find whatever post you're needing to work around, go around that post, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then if needed, change colors to pull through the next one. So those are going to be the 3 main stitches you'll encounter: front post double, front post treble, front post double treble. Now the next technique that you're going to probably see that might be a little bit challenging are the front or the stitches together. So the way that I had to write the instructions is sometimes you're going to be joining 2 different types of stitches together. Sometimes you might join the same one together. It just depends. So in this case, if I wanted to do, let's get a couple stitches over so that way I'm not still stretched over here to the right. Okay, so let's say for instance, you needed to now work a front post double crochet 2 together. So what that means is that you would front post double crochet around whatever stitch it might indicate. So whether it's maybe a stitch back here, a stitch just underneath, a stitch to the left, just pay attention to where the next empty stitch that you need to work around is. So you would yarn over, go around the stitch, yarn over, pull up 1, yarn over, pull up 2. Then you're going to go around whatever the next stitch is. So whether it's another post stitch or a half double crochet or whatever you might need to do, you'll yarn over, go around the indicated stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. At this point, you're going to have 3 loops on your hook. One that was our active loop that we started with, and then these 2 are the incompleted front post double crochets. So now we're going to join them at the top with a single yarn over, draw through all 3. Now I did it with my main color. You may want to check to see if you need to change to your accent color before that, but in either case, what that does is it takes these 2 front post double crochets and joins them together as one stitch. That'll be the same thing if you see a front post treble crochet 2 together or front post double treble crochet 2 together. Now the other type of join together is going to be 2 different stitches joined. So what you do is you go in order of whatever stitch is listed first and then join it with the stitch that's listed second. So for example, if it says front post double crochet / front post treble crochet together across the next 2 posts, what that means is we will work a front post double crochet to start around whatever stitch. Don't finish it. Then you'll work a front post treble crochet around whatever the next post stitch is. We'll wind up with 3 loops on our hook just like before. Yarn over, pull through, and now we'll join a front post double and a front post treble together. The front post double was the first one you worked, the front post treble was the second one. Now if it was a front post treble / front post double 2 together, then you would switch that. You would work the front post treble crochet first, then the front post double crochet. So those are going to be the ways that will kind of shape the different runes depending on how long or how angled the different letters need to be. One more that I want to show you is the, actually no, sorry, there's 2 more. Sorry, I forgot about that. There's actually 2 more. So one of them is going to be the 3 together. So the 3 together is just like it sounds. So it's worked the same way as the 2 together, but this time you're doing it across 3 stitches. So if I need to do 3 front post double crochet 3 together, I'll yarn over, go around whatever post I need to work around first, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over, go around whatever post it's telling me to go around next, yarn over, pull up, and then yarn over, pull through 2. So now I'll have my 2 loops here. Normally, if this was a 2 together, I would just stop here, but since it's 3 together, I need to do 1 more. So yarn over, go around, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and now I'll have 4 loops on my hook. The first active one that was from the previous stitch, and then the 3 of the incompleted front post double crochets, yarn over, pull through all 4, and that will join 3 stitches together as one. The final thing to show you is going to be in one of the runes where it kind of, or I think it might be 2 runes, I'm not sure. But if there's a rune where there's any kind of like Xing or crossing, like kind of in the middle, you're going to need to do a cabling technique where you actually work a crossed front post stitch. So for example, if I'm doing a front post treble crochet across, what it would tell me is to skip a stitch, like whatever post stitch I might work around the next post stitch with a front post treble crochet. So let's say this was the post stitch that I needed to work next, but they want me to skip that and go over to, let's say, this one. I would go over across to that one, go around, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then it'll tell me that I need to, skip the one behind and then do half double crochets, like maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. Let's just say, let's do 3. There we go. And then after that, it's going to want me to work a front post treble in the one we skipped. So if this was the one that we skipped earlier, what I would do is I would need to work my front post treble by yarning over twice, going in front of this one that I just made. We're going to go back to the one we skipped, go around, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then if I flatten it back out, we can see we've now created our X shape right there. Another technique that you're going to need to know is being able to work into the correct half double crochet. So a lot of times you'll be working directly around a post stitch, but sometimes it'll say work the treble crochet in the half double crochet that's 2 rows below and then 1 or 2 stitches to the right or left or something like that. All that means is that, like what I've got here, this was a double treble crochet and it was worked in the half double crochet that was 2 rows below and 3 stitches to the right. So if I were here, if I wanted to go 2 rows below, that would be this row right here. And then it says to 3 stitches to the right. So this one would be directly below where my stitch would have started. And then I just go 3 stitches to the right. 1, 2, 3, and that's where I will work it. So anytime you see that instruction, that's all that means is you just drop down and then move right or left however many stitches, and that's the one you work into. That will give you these nice angles that the runes are going to need to be able to work. When we work on the wrong side for our color work, what we're going to do is drop the main color strand and just leave it here at the beginning because the entire wrong side will be worked in this contrasting color. So I just leave it and then work my first half double crochet into my very first stitch. Now notice that I'm working directly into a main color stitch, and that's okay. So it doesn't matter what the color stitch is, you just work a contrasting color half double crochet into every stitch across. So I'll work in every single one of these. Even when I get into one of my gray ones here, I'm just going to work a half double crochet like normal. Then when I get back around to the beginning, I'll be able to turn and then use my half double crochet to grab this main color strand like I showed earlier, and then continue working my color work for my runes. So those are all of the main types of stitches, stitch joins, and techniques that you're going to encounter. Every single one of these, if you'll notice, I always made sure to skip the stitch that was behind it, and that's going to be important because that way your stitch count doesn't get off. So those are all the tips that I have for how you can make any of the runes. So now you should be equipped to be able to make the rest of your rune band. And now take some time on this one because it is going to be something that you have to pay attention to. So like for instance, I would need to consult and be like, okay, so now that I've done that rune instruction, what's the next rune that's in my list? I need to follow the instruction for that one. The next rune, I'll follow the instruction. And then you just keep going around and around. So once you're done working that part of your rune band up, I will meet you back and talk to you about how to then work the shoulders. To begin the shoulder section, what we need to do is finish off a couple of rounds of main color stitches. So then that way we can finish off this rune band. So what we're going to do on the very last stitch of the final round of the color work section, which will be row 14 of all of the runes, we're going to work our final half double crochet, but we're going to change to our main color for this very last stitch. So we're going to do our invisible join like we do like normal. So we'll find that, I'm going to pull this out of the side. We'll find our back loop of our first stitch. And then we will grab our main color yarn and pull that through as the final yarn over of our half double crochet. Now at this point, because we are done with the actual color work section, we can go ahead and fasten off our contrasting color and set that aside, because now we will be working just in the main color once again. So now that I've set that aside, we can weave that in later. So we're going to go ahead and turn our work. And now what we can do is just start working half double crochets. And for this round, we're just going to work them into both loops. So every single stitch that we see here, we're just going to work a half double crochet into every loop. So I've made my first half double crochet. Go ahead and grab my stitch marker and place that in the stitch there. There we go. And then half double crochet in the main color through every stitch all the way around. And then we will do our invisible join at the end, and then we will turn and then work our next round. So I'm going to go ahead and work this part off camera, and I will meet you back to show you what to do for the next round. I just reached the last stitch of my rounds. I'll take my stitch marker out there, work my final stitch with the invisible join here. And there we go. Oh, I split my yarn. Oh, it's because my stitch marker is splitting it. Okay, that's fine. There we go. Okay, got my invisible join there. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. And now for this next round, we are going to be mimicking that framing that happened down here with this texturing. And so we're going to be working our half double crochets in the third loop only. So as a reminder, the third loop is going to be this one that's kind of in the center of our stitch. So these two top V loops we're going to ignore, and we're going to work directly into this stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do my first half double crochet going from the bottom into that third loop, and then going ahead and marking my very first stitch of the round. Split it again. Let's try again. There we go. Okay. And then I just work half double crochets in the third loop only all the way around, and then join with an invisible join at the beginning. So I'm going to again work that up, third loop only, all the way around, and then I will join you back to show you what to do for the next round. I just finished working up the half double crochet through the third loop round, and now it's time for us to go back to working our herringbone double crochets. So to do this, we're going to work herringbone double crochets actually in the back loop only of all of these half double crochets we just worked. So to do that, we're going to start by working a beginning herringbone double crochet into the back loop of our very first stitch here. So we'll do our beginning herringbone double. Place our stitch marker back in here. And then work back loop herringbone double crochets in every stitch around. And as you work in the back loops only all the way around to get to the end, you'll also be placing stitch markers along the way where it will tell you to work a certain number of stitches. Then you place a stitch marker in the last stitch made. All that's doing is it's marking where we're going to start doing our decreases in the following rounds. On round 2, what we're going to do is start doing our decrease pattern. So all the sizes are going to decrease exactly the same way. We're just going to be at different decrease points depending on where you needed to place your stitch markers. So how to do the decrease rounds is if you're starting with round 2 and all the even numbered rounds, that's going to be on our wrong side. So that's going to be worked using back post stitches. And I'll show you what I mean by that when I get there. So what you'll do is you'll just work herringbone double crochets until you have 2 stitches remaining before the next stitch marker. So I'm getting there pretty close. And there we go. So once I have 2 stitches remaining before the next stitch marker, this stitch marker is going to represent the center of our decrease set here. So what we're going to do is work the next 2 stitches together, and we're going to do it using a technique that we did when we were doing the runes, and we had to work some of these stitches together that weren't exactly the same stitch. So what you're going to do for the first one is you're going to work a herringbone double crochet and a back post double crochet together to decrease by 1 stitch. So to do that, you start by doing your herringbone double crochet into the next stitch, and then you work it until you have your final yarn over and pull through, but you don't do that final yarn over and pull through yet. So you do it until you have those 2 loops on your hook after you do your yarn over and pull through 1. Then for our back post stitch, we're going to locate the next stitch here, and we're going to find the post of that stitch. And a back post stitch is worked by doing a yarn over, and then rather than going into the top of the stitch, we're going to actually go behind the stitch, come through the right side, then go around the post, go through the left side, and now our hook is around the post of the stitch, just like when we worked front post stitches in the rune band earlier. Then we'll yarn over, pull a loop through, and then because we want this to be a regular double crochet, I don't pull it through like with the herringbones. I'll just then yarn over and pull through those 2 like normal. And now I will have 3 loops on my hook. So I'll have the active loop, the loop from the herringbone double crochet, and the loop from this back post double crochet. Then once I have those all on my hook, I'll yarn over and pull through all 3. And that joins a herringbone double crochet and a back post double crochet together, decreasing our stitch count by 1. Then we have our marked stitch right here. So our marked stitch will always be just a regular post stitch. So in this case, because we're on the wrong side, we'll be working back post stitches because we want the texture to be on the front here. So we'll yarn over, and stretch this out and find that this was the one we just worked around. So the one that was marked was this one. So we'll go around the back to the front of that center post, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we just completed that center back post double crochet. So then I'll take my stitch marker, Place it right back into that stitch to help make sure it marks it clearly as the center stitch. Then we're ready to do the next decrease, which is basically flipping the one we did on this side. So we're going to do a back post double crochet, herringbone double crochet together. So we'll start with our back post double. We will yarn over, find our post here, go around the back of it, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then don't complete it yet. We'll then go into the next stitch. So just to make sure, kind of stretch this out here and see we've wrapped around the post of this stitch. That means we're not going to work into this V. That's the part of this stitch. We're instead going to work into this V. So we'll work our herringbone double crochet into this stitch here. So we'll yarn over, insert, pull a loop through the stitch and that first loop on the hook. And I snagged there. Let's try that again. There we go. Then we will yarn over and pull through 1, just like I do with a normal herringbone double crochet. And now I've got my 3 loops on my hook, active loop, back post double, and herringbone double. And then I can yarn over and draw it all together as one stitch. And I've now decreased by another one. So every time you see a stitch marker, you're decreasing by 2 stitches, one on one side, one on the other, and then the center one is just a regular post stitch. Then all you do is you just work herringbone double crochets into each stitch until you get 2 stitches before the next stitch marker, and then you just repeat all of that again. So when you get to your next stitch marker and you have those 2 stitches remaining before it, you just go back and repeat exactly what I showed just now. So you can always rewind and go rewatch that to help you on the next one. So I'm going to go ahead and work that off camera, and then I'll show you what to do for the next round of decreases. So round 3 and every odd numbered round is going to be worked the same as well. So we're going to be doing decreases when we reach these stitch marker points. So you're going to do the same thing as you did the previous round. We're going to work until there are 2 stitches remaining before our next stitch marker. And you'll notice that one of those stitches that's there was our back post and herringbone double crochet together right here as one stitch. So I'm going to show you how to deal with that when we get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and work my herringbone double crochets. And now we can see that we have our stitch marked stitch, and then we have these 2 stitches remaining here. So what we're going to do is now a herringbone double crochet, front post double crochet together. So in this next stitch, we're going to start by doing a herringbone double crochet until we are about to complete it. So we'll go ahead and pull up my loop here and then pull through 1, leave it incomplete. And now to do my front post double crochet. We are only going to be working around the post of this back post double crochet. So we're ignoring this herringbone double crochet that we worked with it together, because that was just used to decrease but kind of fill in that gap so we didn't have any extra gaps or holes in our work so it can stay nice and insulated. So I don't actually need to do anything with that stitch. I just need to work my front post double crochet around this next one. So I'll find that back post stitch I worked earlier, work my hook around it just like we did when we were working front post stitches in the rune band, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And just like before, we will now have 3 loops on our hook, the active loop, the incomplete herringbone double crochet, and the incomplete front post double crochet. We will now yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, creating a decrease right here. So we've now decreased by another stitch. We now find our marked stitch right here is the center stitch. So we're going to take that out. And just like on the previous round, we're not doing any decreasing into this one. This is just a regular post stitch. But because we're on the right side, we want to do a front post double crochet. So we'll yarn over, go around the stitch, going through the front, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then I will go ahead and remark that as my center stitch. And there we go. And then on the other side, we're going to do the same thing we did over here, but flipped. So we'll start with our front post double crochet. Remember, we want to work around the post stitch, not around the herringbone that we connected together with it. So we're going to yarn over, go around the post of that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through two. Now here's where it can get a little tricky. Like, okay, just to make sure, where do I work the next part, which is the herringbone double crochet part? You might be tempted to work it here, but if we look back here at the V's of our stitches, we're working 3 post stitches, so we want to make sure we're skipping 3 V's because each of those was already worked by doing a post stitch. So if we look here, this is the first V, that's the second V, and that's the third V. So if I flip it back over here, that means that this stitch is one that I actually need to skip. So I need to be working into this stitch as my herringbone double crochet. Otherwise, I'm not actually decreasing anything. I'm just keeping the same stitch count. So make sure you work your herringbone double crochet into the next stitch and making sure we're skipping 3 stitches behind our post stitches. So now we'll yarn over, pull through the stitch and our first loop, yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 to decrease the post stitch and the herringbone double crochet together. And then in the next stitch, we just do a regular herringbone double crochet, and we do that again in every stitch until we get to the next marked stitch section, where we will just repeat all of that again. So I try to go slow to show you how to do everything step by step. If you need to rewatch it a couple of times, this does take some practice, especially making sure you're finding that correct spot. If you do ever just get off by your stitch count, you can always just go back, decrease correctly, or double check that you are looking for those V's on the back. Sometimes they can be a bit tricky to find, but if you just fold it over and just look, we've got the V's 1, 2, 3, and then kind of hold it there, and then you'll be in the right spot. If you really need to go this far, you can also feel free to always put 3 stitch markers in. Because if you put those 3 stitch markers in and then work your post stitches, you'll see where the ones that need to be skipped are. I don't personally need to do all 3, but if you feel like you're just keep missing it and that's what you need to do, feel free to do that. Do what you need to be able to get the correct stitches, because you want to make sure the stitch count is correct when we get to the end. All right. So then, for the remainder of the neck, or the shoulders, before we get to the neck part, you're basically just going to repeat those 2 rows. You're going to repeat the back post and the front post decreases along each of these stitch marked areas until you reach 6 rounds. Once you reach 6 rounds, then you're going to just fasten off. So I'm going to work up my 6 rounds, show you the fastening off, and then I'll show you the next part, which is joining to create the neck. I've now finished working up my shoulder shaping, and I've gone ahead and fastened off. And what I would recommend is going ahead and weaving in this yarn tail just to get it out of the way and to get these stitches here secure. And as you can see, I've removed the beginning and end of round markers. I won't really need them anymore. If you want to keep them in for this first round, just so then that way you can, easily see which stitches you're supposed to work into, you can. I'm just going to go ahead and remove mine because I don't really need that. So the next step is to do our neck shaping. And to do the neck shaping, what we'll need to do is locate the center 6 stitches on the front side of our tunic. Now, one of the easiest ways I found with that is to actually count inward from our post stitches here. So from my post stitches, I would count out that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., all the way until the stitch before the last post stitches. So that way I'm not having to count all the stitches around. But I had 72 here in the center. So when I divide that by 2, I get 36. So I know that there are 36 stitches evenly split on either side. So I found where 36 and 36 were located here. So it's these 2 stitches in the middle. And then I just counted out 6 stitches from there and was like, here we go. That's the first one, and that's the 6th one. And I went ahead and put stitch markers in there. Now that we have this, what we're going to do is we're going to be skipping these 6 stitches to create that gap for our neck plunge that you see on the front. and we're going to join either in the left side if we're crocheting right-handed, or on the right side if we're crocheting left-handed. In either case, we're going to join to 1 stitch away from those 6 stitches using our main color. And we'll join with a slip stitch. So I've got a slip knot, grab my yarn with my hook, pull it through, just kind of pull to tighten that. There we go. And then I will chain one to secure it. Once I chain 1 to secure, I will then work a beginning herringbone double crochet into the same stitch that I just joined into. And then once I do that, I'm going to work a herringbone double crochet into all of the stitches, but I'm going to continue doing the same decreasing that I was doing in the shoulder shaping. One thing I did want to go ahead and show on camera is working across these joined beginning and end of round stitches. So if you can't really see clearly like which ones are the actual stitches, that's okay. Honestly, it's not going to be the end of the world if you're off by a stitch or two here in the neck shaping, because it's going to fit either way. So what I try to look for is I'm like, okay, so here is the stitch that had the final yarn over pulled through that I then wove in back here. And so I know that that was my last stitch of the round. And then I try to look for where was the one that it was pulled through that made this stitch. And I'm trying to think if it's either this one or it might be this one. I'm not exactly sure. So I kind of like maybe squish it together and kind of look to see. It looks like it may have been, I think it might have been this one right here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and work in those two. So what I'll do is I will herringbone double crochet into these stitches up to there. And then try to make sure that on ones like this one, I make sure I'm going under both loops of the stitch. So there's one loop and there's the second loop right there. Well, I say that. And you'll just try to make sure you insert under whatever loops seem to make sense. Without splitting your yarn, of course. There we go. Then it looks like we've got honestly, that feels way too tight. I'm just going to skip that one and just work into this one. See, so it doesn't really honestly matter. So in the end, you just kind of, well, although that does create a gap I don't like. I don't really want that. So let's do maybe right into here. As you can see, I myself am not entirely sure where exactly I'm wanting to put things, but just kind of winging it as I go, just getting it to look the way that I want. There we go. Herringbone double crochets on the back and no gaps or anything like that. So yeah, so really just get creative, try to find the stitches as best you can, try to make sure that there's not as big jump or anything, and it'll look just fine as you can see there. So I'm going to continue working all the way around to the end, and then I'll meet you back. I'm coming now to the stitch marker, marking my center 6 stitches. And what I'll do is just work one final herringbone double crochet right before that stitch marker. And then leaving those stitches there, I'm just simply going to turn. And then I will repeat that process all the way around. I'm going to work a beginning herringbone double crochet into the first stitch, herringbone double crochet, do my decrease, back post double crochets since I'm on the wrong side, and then do my decrease on the other side. Keep working around and continue doing that to shape the neck down. I've just finished working up all of my decreases, and now it's time to start joining our 3 sets of front post double crochets. They are now going to be joined into a cable that's going to go along the side of the neck until we finish the neck portion. But the other thing that's going to happen is that at the top of our dip here in the front, we're going to need to round it out because this corner tends to just kind of flop over if you just leave it as is. So rounding it out kind of gives it that nice flat lay and will make it easier later when we do the trim. So all you're going to be doing when it comes to making that rounded side is you're just going to be doing some decreases. So to do the decrease, the first thing you're going to do is the beginning double crochet or the beginning herringbone double crochet decrease. Now, all this means is that like we do with the other decreases, we're essentially going to be working 2 stitches together. So what we'll do is we're going to insert our hook into this very first stitch, yarn over and pull through everything like we do for the beginning herringbone double crochet. So essentially we just made a slip stitch. Then we're going to do our chain 1, insert our hook back through, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, and just like when we do any of the other stitches together, when we reach our final pull through, we don't complete it yet. We're going to leave everything still on the hook because then in the next stitch, we need to do our next herringbone double crochet. So we'll yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through the stitch and the loop on our hook, yarn over, pull through 1, and now we have 2 stitches that are not complete, and we will join together at the top with a final yarn over and pull through. And that's how we will decrease at the beginning of each of these rows of the neck. So after we do that, we then just work herringbone double crochets all the way until we reach these post stitches. So I'll go ahead and work those and then talk to you about what to do when you get to those post stitches to start the cable. And now once I'm to my post stitches, we're going to be doing our cable. So your cable is going to have 2 sets of instructions. You're going to have a right side set of instructions and a wrong side set of instructions. So pay attention to which side of your tunic you're going to be working. So we're starting here on the right side. So on my right side, I'm going to be working my braided cable by skipping these 3 front post double crochets and just working around these next 3 front post double crochets. And I'm going to do front post treble crochets around these 3. So to do a front post treble crochet like we did earlier, you're just going to yarn over twice around your hook. Skipping these first 3, we're going to go into these next 3. We're going to go around the post of that first stitch, yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. There we go. And if it feels like it's kind of like stretching a bit far, that's okay. It's meant to do that. So it's going to create a nice lean here. And then we're just going to do that around these next 2. So we will yarn over twice, go around the next post stitch, yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then do that one more time around the third one here in the middle. And there we go. Now what we're going to do to create that crossed braided look is that we're going to go back and work into these 3 that we skipped earlier, working in front of the stitches that we just made. So I tried to make this where it's the easiest possible way of doing these cables is that you're always working in a way that works naturally. So we're not having to try to work our way back behind into this little window here. We're always working on the right side. We're working in front of these stitches we just made. So to do that, we're going to do 3 front post trebles again, but around these skipped ones. So we will yarn over twice, going in front of these stitches we just made. We will go around the post of this first stitch we skipped, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we do that into these next 2. So we're going to go yarn over twice, find our next post that we skipped, go around, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And then we have one more to do. We'll do yarn over twice, go around this next one, and finish our front post treble crochet. And now if we kind of pull it back here, we can see that we kind of tug this. These front post treble crochets we created earlier are now behind these front post treble crochets we just created here. That creates that cable cross here to start our braided cable here along the neck. Then we just have these 3 front post double crochets left over here. Now there might look like there's a large gap, but that's because of all the decreasing we did earlier. We're basically just cinching this all into the cable. Now this next one is going to be 3 front post double crochets. So we're going to reach over here. We're just going to yarn over once, go around this next post stitch in our 3rd and final set here, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. It's going to kind of bring all of that together. So right now it might be a little spread out feeling, but that's okay. Eventually this is going to start working to where it's not as spread out. It's going to come in and just stay the same width for the remainder of the neck. And then we just do that same thing around the next 2. We're going to do a front post double crochet around this next one, and then a front post double crochet around this next one. And there we go. We've got the start of our cable here. So now that we've got the start of our cable, we know that there were 3 stitches, 3 stitches, and 3 stitches. So there were a total of 9 stitches as part of this cable. That means that we don't want to work into any of the 9 stitches that are back here because we've already worked the post stitches around them. So we don't want to accidentally double up our stitch count here. So we're going to make sure that we skip the 9 stitches that are back here, which if I can see here, carefully, let's kind of pull back. It might be a little hard to kind of see, but I'm going to tuck these through. We've got, it was the last one that we worked into with a stitch right here because those are the legs of my herringbone double crochet. So we start counting here. So then we look for these V's. So we've got 1 V, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 9. So that's the last one we need to skip. So the next stitch we work in is this one right here. So if I pull back here, we can do our next herringbone double crochet into this one. The temptation would be to try to work into this one because it looks like it's the next one after this, but this was the 9th stitch. It just happened to be a little bit more over here because of that decrease we did on the previous round. So do not accidentally work in that stitch. Always make sure you're counting to make sure you're skipping 9. And then we will work our herringbone double crochet into the one after that. And then you just work herringbone double crochets into all of the stitches going around the back of our neck here. Oh my gosh, there we go. And then you're going to get all the way around to where you will see the cable on the opposite side. And then you just repeat the exact same instructions over here that we just did. So I'm going to work the remainder of this row off camera, and then I will meet you back to talk to you about how to do the wrong side version of this cable. Once you work around the neck, doing all the cable work and everything, it's time for us to do the decrease on the opposite side. So when you do the decrease on the opposite side, it's just essentially a herringbone double crochet two together. So once you reach these last two stitches, rather than working a herringbone double crochet in each one, you're going to do a two together. So we will yarn over, insert into this first stitch, pull a loop through the stitch and the loop on our hook, yarn over, pull through one. Without completing it, we will then yarn over, go into the last stitch, pull up a loop through the stitch and the loop on our hook, yarn over, pull through one, and then we will have two herringbone double crochets ready to join. So then we yarn over and pull through everything, and that performs the decrease on the opposite side. Then when you turn your work, you're ready to begin that again. So all you do is just do the beginning herringbone double crochet and herringbone double crochet two together, just like we did the first time. We work until we're almost complete, but we don't do that final pull through. Yarn over, go into the next stitch here, pull through, and then we complete it by drawing them together. And that's going to start rounding this corner because we'll have a decrease on every single row. And then you work up the herringbone double crochets until you get to the cable, and then I'll show you how to do that cable for this row. And there we go. And a tip here is that if for some reason you have a hard time identifying when you've reached a post stitch, like the top of it, since crochet stitches don't always line up exactly perfectly, and you're like, well, which of the V's is on the top and so on, you can always pop a stitch marker on the first and last stitch of your cable, and that will make it a little easier to see, and then you just move them up as you make new post stitches. But in either case, how this wrong side cable is going to work is actually very similar to the right side cable. We're just going to be doing back post stitches and working behind stitches we just made rather than in front of. So what I mean by that is that we're going to look to the back of our work here, which is the right side, and we're going to see that we have these three sets, or these three front post stitches that we did earlier. And then we have over here these three that are kind of stretching all the way over here. And then these three that are right here are going back behind here. But notice that because they crossed, they actually go in order of these three here, followed by these three that are stretching here, then these three that are tucked in the back here. So the first ones we actually want to work around are going to be these three that are stretching because they are the middle ones right now. So they're the ones coming to the middle of our cable. So that means we need to skip these three that are right here. So just like on the right side, we're going to skip the next three post stitches, and we will work three back post treble crochets around these next middle stitches. So we're going to yarn over twice, find those three back here, and then we will go around coming from the back. So we'll go through around the post of the stitch through the back way. Then we'll yarn over and pull up our loop. And then yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, pull through two, just like we did with the front post stitches. And then we do the same thing around this next one. So then we will do yarn over twice, go around this post, coming through the back here, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, pull through two. This may be a bit fiddly. Back post stitches are usually a little more challenging than front post stitches because you have to kind of work backwards and kind of flip and look to see what you're doing. Some people are able to do them without looking. So like they could just do this, reach back, find the stitch they need, and then work it. I personally can't do that. I always have to flip to look to see, to make sure I'm looking at the right one. So however you want to do it, it's up to you. But all you have to do is just make sure you're going around the right stitches. So always find this one that are these ones that are stretched here in the middle. Okay, then we'll go around our very last one here, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, pull through two. So now I have these three back post treble crochets worked. so that our cable is continuing to show up on the front. Now we need to go and rework back post treble crochets, but around these 3 that we skipped that were originally right here. So to do that, we're going to yarn over twice, but instead of going in front of the stitches I made, we're actually going to go behind them and reach back and grab that first stitch here going through the back. And then I'll show that again because I know I probably went a little fast with that. Here we go. So yarn over twice. Then going behind these stitches, we're going to go behind these stitches. We're going to find that first front post double crochet that we skipped and work around that post. And then we will yarn over, pull up a loop. There we go. They're a little tight there. I can just kind of spread them out there. But then we will yarn over and pull through just those first 2. And there we go. I've only pulled through 1, so there's 2. Okay. Yarn over, pull through 2 again. And then yarn over, pull through 2 again. And we've got our next back post treble crochet completed. Then we do that same thing again. We will yarn over twice, go behind these stitches here, find my next post stitch to work around. It's going to be this second one right here. Go around it, pull up my loop. Oh, got away from me there. And there we go. Pull up my loop. There we go. And if you need to grab and stretch and pull and manipulate your stitches to get around them, do that all you need to, because they'll eventually fall back into place where they need to go. But for me, anytime I do cable work, I'm always tugging and pulling and stretching stitches to kind of get my hook and yarn where they need to go. So then we just do that again around the last one. So we go behind, find our final post stitch right here that we need to work around, and work our final back post treble crochet. Ooh, and there we go. Then we have to work our 3 back post double crochets. So just like on the front, we have to do 3, we did the 3 front post double crochets to end it. So in this case, we're going to do 3 back post double crochets to end it. So that's going to go around these 3 that are right here, because those are the ones that are stretching to the back, and they're the last 3 here. So to do those, we're going to yarn over once because we're just doing double crochets. We're going to find this first post stitch, and then we're going to come from the back and go around the post of this stitch, just like so. If we need to, we can look here to make sure we're pulling the right one, okay? Then we yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then I do the same thing around these next 2. We yarn over once, go through the back, come around the post of this next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we do that one more time. So there's always in sets of 3. So we find this next one, yarn over, go around the back of it, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now we have finished this cable. It looks kind of like a hot mess back here. But if we look at the front, I turn it around here, we can see that now we've got the start of a nice little braid. So we've got these 2 that were crossed here, and then this one. And then now we've got that they crossed down here. Now these 2 are crossing here, and this one's coming out. And then they're just going to kind of alternate, like you see when you braid hair. You're going to see like these alternating crosses going back and forth. So now I'm going to turn it back this way. Here we go. Sorry about bumping into my microphone there. Okay, so now that I've done that, we're going to make sure we skip 9 stitches again. So a way to kind of tell with that, instead of trying to count all of these, if you just look at this last post here, it's connected to this little stitch V area right here. That's the top of this stitch. So we're going to make sure we just skip that one and work the next herringbone double crochet into the one after that. So not this one, but this one right here. We will do our next herringbone double crochet. And then all you have to do is just work herringbone double crochets until you reach the post stitches on the other side, and just repeat exactly that same thing, and then herringbone double crochet all the way to the end. And that is all you have to do for both sides of the cable. So you're just going to continue doing that. You're going to work herringbone double crochets. When you reach the post stitches, you're going to work the right side cable if you're on the right side, wrong side cable if you're on the wrong side, making sure you're grabbing the right one. And then you'll do that for however many rows it says to do for your size, and then you'll be done with the neck. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like towards the end when I work mine up. And so I'll show you what it should look like. And here we are. So I just finished working up all of these cables right here. So they should have that nice little small braided look here, joining up all of these front post stitches. You can see the decreases that we did to give us this a little bit more of a rounded look here. And you're like, okay, if it's a little bit rough looking, it's okay. This is an unfinished edge. We will be adding trim to this to give it a more finished, polished look. So yours should still look about like this. You should have your cables running along the sides with these rounded, decreased edges for the neck. And depending on which size you did, you may be working 6 rows or 5 rows. Whichever one it is, you should always end on a wrong side row. If you find that you would like more rows for your neck, like if you want a bit of a taller neck, a higher neck or anything like that, you can feel free to just continue adding rows to this and just trying it on and seeing like if it sits exactly where you want to. But at some point in time, you want to be careful not to keep decreasing if you're going to add too many more rows, because then the decreases are going to run into the cable and we don't want that to happen. If you do know that you are going to go taller, you can also, instead of decreasing every row, you can maybe decrease every other row. Or if you're only adding a couple extra rows, you could maybe decrease every other row for maybe the first 4 and then decrease every row until the end. You can kind of like, work through and figure out what you want to do. It's the neck area. It's not going to take you too terribly long if you do need to make adjustments here. But just know that if you need to, you can always make it taller and adjust this decrease pattern here. Now that we've talked plenty about the shoulders and the neck and everything like that, it is time for us to move on to working the sleeves of our tunic. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take our main color and we're going to create our slip knot here. And we're going to find these 6 stitches, and we're going to be working starting in the stitch that's just to the left of center. So that's going to be our 3rd stitch. Or if you're left-handed and go in the opposite direction, it'll be the one to the right of center. But in either case, we locate these 3 stitches and we're going to insert our hook into that 3rd stitch so that we're going to be starting in the center area here. Then pop our slip knot there onto our hook. We'll pull it through. And then we will do our beginning herringbone double crochet into this 1st stitch. So we'll start with our little slip stitch here just to kind of secure it. And then we'll do our chain 1, work 1st one here, go. And now that we've secured it there, we're going to go ahead and work a herringbone double crochet into these next 2 stitches here. And now that I've worked into these 2, so one thing to note is that you'll notice there are herringbone double crochets that are worked into this stitch, and then the 1st chain doesn't happen until right here. So we're having to jump all the way across this worked stitch and this herringbone double crochet row before we get all the way over here. And if we try to jump here and do a herringbone double crochet, that's going to leave this really large gap. And I don't really want that. And I don't want to sew that in later because I just don't really like to sew anything in crochet as much as I possibly can. So one thing you're going to do is basically a herringbone double crochet 4 together. I don't actually outline that directly in the pattern, like the stitches or anything, because this is literally the only time you ever are going to need to do this is in the corners of these. And I didn't think that was necessary to add into um, the stitch abbreviations, because I also then describe in the pattern how to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and show you here. What I do is I locate these stitches, or these things that are not stitches, and I'm going to work a partial herringbone double crochet into each one. So I go ahead and yarn over. I find this stitch that was worked into with this herringbone double crochet here. I go ahead and insert my hook into that one, pull up my loop there, and then I yarn over, pull through one. I don't finish it. And then I find the herringbone double crochet that's on the side here, and into that side, I go ahead and insert and create the start of a herringbone double crochet there. Then, before I get to the chain, we've got kind of this top of that herringbone double crochet, and it's going to create like kind of this big gap right there. I don't want that big gap either. So I go ahead and kind of work into this kind of area right here where I grab 2 strands of yarn. See if I show that better. So I kind of go between these kind of like 2 strands that are right here. I'll insert my hook there, and that way it grabs these 2 strands. So it gives it a little bit more of a solid foundation to wrap around. And that way when I work that third one, it kind of just looks like it's worked into a regular stitch. Now that I have these 3, I've pretty much covered all of this gap, and it's going to look like it's all covered by these herringbone double crochets that I started. But once I work my next one, we're basically going to work all of these together as one stitch. So we're not changing the stitch count on our arm or on our sleeve area here, because we still want a certain number of stitches for our sleeve. I don't want to increase any extra on here. So this prevents it from being extra, but does cover up this gap. Now, to locate these chains. So the reason we worked the chains the way that we did is so that we could see these V's a little bit more clearly, and that helps us make sure we're working into the right number of chains. So I locate my very first one, which is going to be actually kind of small here, but it's going to be this V that's right here. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over, insert under both loops of that V of that chain. Muscle my way into there best I can. Hold on, hold on. I'm gonna get this. Just like you will when you're working your own. Oh man, that is tight. Okay. Yeah, so if you're struggling with this, just like I am, just know it's okay. Just kind of do your best. Okay, I'm feeling like it's gonna work there. Ugh, okay, no, it did not. You know, I'll just kind of do it there. There we go. Not quite into the chain the way I wanted it to be, but it'll go ahead and work. So you go ahead and pull up your loop through your chain and through the loop that was on your hook. And then we'll yarn over, pull through one. And now we basically have 4 herringbone double crochets started, and we're just going to yarn over and pull through all of those. So now we can see that it kind of pulls those stitches in to cover up this gap that we would have had. But along the top here, it's still only 4 stitches that we've worked. Sorry, my hook is in the way. It's only 4 stitches that we've technically worked. So the stitch count should now be 3 from the underarm and then 1 for that very first chain underneath or on the sleeve part. Now that we've gone through all of that, the rest of the way, you're pretty much just going to work a herringbone double crochet into each of these chains. So you're just going to be working underneath those V's here. Go. And just work a, oh, got loose on me there. And just work a herringbone double crochet all the way around. Oh, stray fibers there. There we go. And then when you work them all the way back around, we're going to have another gap on this opposite side. And so we're going to cover that up the same way we did over here, just going the opposite direction. But I'll go ahead and work my way around to this point, and then I'll show you how to do it on this side. And then after that, how to close up the remainder of these stitches, and then what to do for the next rounds. I'm getting close now to the end before I need to do the gap issue here. So one thing that you'll want to pay attention to is what you're actually looking at, just so you know exactly where your final chain is versus when you start working into the stitch here on the underarm. So the stitch that I have marked here, that's my last underarm one. So if I follow the path here, we can see that that means this was the stitch that this herringbone double crochet is worked into. So we've got this herringbone double crochet along the side here. So that's the side of the herringbone double crochet, which means that the top of the herringbone double crochet is right here. And since that's the top of it, that means that the very first or the very last chain would have been this one right here. So this is going to be the final chain that will be worked into before we need to start worrying about this gap. So if I look, it looks like I have 3 more stitches to work before I have to deal with that gap. So I'm going to go ahead and work those 3 here. So we go 1, 2, and then 3. Now, to deal with this gap, we are going to do the same thing we did to the other side. We're going to basically be working 4 incompleted herringbone double crochets that we will then join at the top. And so we'll start by doing a yarn over, and then just like the other one, we're just going the opposite direction. We're going to start with the top of this herringbone double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert into that top of the stitch, just grabbing a couple of strands of yarn, going ahead and starting a herringbone double crochet, but not finishing it. Then going into the side of this herringbone double crochet, I'll go ahead and insert my hook. Found it. Actually, let's go through it. That way we're not pulling this hole open anymore. So we'll go ahead and start a herringbone double crochet there. And you just, if you find that you're like, I'm not exactly sure where to put my hook, it really honestly doesn't matter. This is just where I'm putting it to kind of spread the stitches across. If you just like put a stitch here, put a stitch here, put a stitch here, and then put your final one in here, then that should work out as well. And if you find that you don't need to use 4, you just need to do 3 together to cover the gap to your satisfaction, you can do that as well. If you actually need to go up to 5 stitches to feel like it's going to cover, you do whatever you need to here, as long as you're making sure that you're joining them all at the end so that your stitch count remains 1 stitch, because that's what it's going to count for, is this stitch that we will work in later. So I'm just showing you that this is the technique that worked for me and where I'm placing them. So, anyway, now that I've told you all that, let's finish this out. So we've got 1, 2, and then we're gonna put our third one into this part here, which was the stitch that this herringbone double crochet was worked into. And then my final one should be in that very first marked stitch that brings us back to the underarm stitches. So I'll go ahead and take that out, work my herringbone double crochet here, and then I will yarn over and pull through all the loops on my hook. And once again, it now looks like we've just got some herringbone double crochets covering that gap, but it's still only 1 stitch when we look at the V's along the top. Now that I've done that, I should have 2 more stitches to work before I get to the end, which I do. I've got 1, 2 right there. So 1, 2. And then there was the very first stitch that we started with. So then we just work those herringbone double crochets into those final 2 stitches, making sure that we work our invisible join here at the end. And there we go. You should now, if you go back and count all your stitches, depending on your size, you should have the correct number of stitches. If you find that you are off by a couple stitches or something like that, it's not a huge deal. What you can do is just like go in and maybe like increase or decrease in a random spot just to kind of get it. Or if you want to, you can think of it as, okay, well, I'll just maybe skip the first couple of decreases on this next part. So what I'm going to show you now is the fact that we will be doing a tapered sleeve. So a tapered sleeve just means it starts wider here at the top and then it gets narrower down to the wrist. And to accomplish that, we're going to have to decrease at certain points along our sleeve. So when we do a decrease round, I'm not needing to do that necessarily here, but like just every round it tells you for your size. Every time you hit one of those rounds, this is the same instruction. So what you'll do is you'll start by doing your beginning herringbone double crochet into your very first stitch. So you'll always still just start with that 1 stitch. And then across the next 2 stitches, you'll work a herringbone double crochet 2 together. So as a reminder of how to do that, you'll yarn over, go into that stitch, pull up your loop like you would to start a herringbone double crochet, yarn over, pull through 1, and then before finishing that stitch, you do the same thing into the next one. Yarn over, go into that stitch, pull up a loop, pull up 1, and then you'll join together like so. Then you would just work herringbone double crochets all the way around until you get to the last 3 stitches over here. And then you just repeat that again. You'll herringbone double crochet 2 together across these 2, work 1 final herringbone double crochet to match the one that we started with, do your invisible join, turn, and then you continue working. So on those decrease rounds, that's all you're simply going to do is the beginning herringbone 2 together, work all the way around to the last 3, then work herringbone 2 together, herringbone in the last one with the invisible join, and then turn, and then just continue working like normal. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and work up the rest of my sleeve, and then I will join you back up to talk to you about what to do when we get to the cuff section. I've just finished working up my sleeve here. So we've got, as you can see, we've got this starting wider here and it's tapering down to where we've got this narrower wrist area here. And then what you're going to do is go ahead and just fasten off your main color because we will be working the cuffs in our contrasting color. The other thing is that I've been using my size F 3.75 millimeter hook. The other thing is I've been using my size F 3.75 millimeter hook. So what you're going to actually do is switch out now for your smaller D 3.25 millimeter hook. So we're going to be dropping about a half millimeter in size because then that's going to give us a slightly tighter cuff that's going to then cinch in the wrist and like give us a nice secure fit here near the hand. Keep all that air from blowing up into the sleeve there and keep it nice and warm. Okay, so in order to do the sleeve cuff with our contrasting color, what we need to first do is join it into our sleeve. So what we'll do is we'll find our very first stitch of the previous round, which for me is going to be right here. And we're actually going to join not into both loops, but we're going to join into the back loop only of this first stitch. So I'm just inserting my hook into the back loop, going ahead and creating my slip knot here, pulling that through, tightening that, And then I'm just going to chain 1 to secure it to there. And then what we'll do is we need to just work 1 round of single crochets in the back loop only, just to kind of give us this nice little transition line here to give us a clean look. If I started just working the cuffs right here, I found that it just made like it didn't look as good. So I liked to do this single crochet round first to get it started. So now that I've joined into this back loop, we're going to insert our hook here, pull up our loop again, and then just create that very first single crochet of the round. Then in the other stitches, we'll just go ahead and work into the back loop only, single crochets, and then we just do that all the way around. And as you can see, what that's going to do is that's going to introduce this color and then give us this nice little ridge right here that makes this color kind of more inset to kind of look like it did in the rune band section here when our contrasting color had this nice little half double crochet ridging right here to kind of frame it. So that's kind of what we're accomplishing here as well. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and work those single crochets around, and then I'll meet you back up to talk to you about how to begin the actual ribbing. Okay, I'm finishing up working these final single crochets here. Let's see, sure that that's okay. So one thing to notice that when you do your fasten off, you've got to sometimes maybe pull this tail of your main color just to make sure you're not accidentally working into an extra stitch. But I mean, honestly, even if you do, it's not like it's really going to affect what this next part is anyway. So now what you're going to do is once we work into the final back loop only of our stitch, we should have this nice round of nice color here with that ridge. We're just going to join into the very first single crochet with a slip stitch. So I'll find my first single crochet that we made. I'll go ahead and work a slip stitch into there just to join them together. There we go. Then once I do that, it is now time for us to begin doing a join as you go cuff band. And so to do a join as you go band, what we're going to do is chain up a certain number, and that is customizable to however long you want your cuff to be. In the pattern, I do list that you would do a chain of 16 because we will be working 15 stitches to get that about 2.5 inches worked with the smaller hook. But if you find you want your cuffs to be shorter, or if you need your cuffs to be really deep and nice and long, you can adjust that chain to however many inches you need that cuff to be. So what I'm about to show you is going to be the same no matter how many chains you do. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and chain my number of chains. Okay. And then once I do that, I'm going to kind of tighten down this last chain that was right here because that's not going to be the first one we work into. Instead, we are going to be working into this second chain from the hook. So to do the ribbing, we are going to be working what are called linked slip stitches. It gives this very nice kind of like almost herringbone looking ribbing when worked the way that we will be working it. And I like it when I was experimenting with ribbing for this design. I really liked it compared to just a regular single crochet ribbing or anything like that. So, but it can be a bit confusing when you just read how to do it. So I'm going to show you how to do that here step by step. In our very first stitch that we need to work, we always need to start with just a regular single crochet just to get us started. So in our second chain from hook, we will go ahead and work our single crochet. But then into the next stitch, we're going to be working our first linked slip stitch. So a slip stitch would normally just start with you inserting your hook into the next stitch. But before we actually do that, we need to link it to this previous stitch. So to link it to that previous stitch, what we're going to do is insert our hook into this chain where we worked the single crochet. So we'll insert it into that first chain we worked, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then when we have this loop on our hook, now we can go into the next chain and insert our hook there. and then grab and pull this loop through both of these on our hook. So we're going to grab our yarn over and then just slip stitch it through all of that. Then we do the same thing for the next stitch. So before we work into this next chain, we go into the chain we just pulled through, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then we will go into the next chain, insert, yarn over, and slip stitch through everything. And then we just keep doing that down our chain. We insert our hook into the previously worked chain, pull up a loop, then insert into the next one and slip stitch all of them. Insert into the previous chain, slip stitch into the next one. And then we just keep doing that. Insert, pull, slip stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and work that down my chain, and I'll meet you back up to talk to you about how to join to the sleeve. Okay, I've reached to where I now have one more chain to work into. So, oh, there we go. I'm going to do my final linked my linked slip stitch. So I'm going to go into my previous chain, pull up my loop, and then go into this final chain and slip stitch. Now, once I do that entire row of linked slip stitches, I'm now ready to join to this sleeve. So that's why it's a join as you go. So to join to this sleeve, we're going to not work into this stitch that we just did right here. We're not going to work into this first single crochet because that first single crochet counts for this row that we just did. So instead, we're going to actually work into the next two single crochets to count for the next two rows we're going to do, because we'll work one row out and then one row back. So we'll always need to slip stitch. So sorry, we will always need to join to two stitches along our sleeve. To do that, all you do is just regular slip stitches. So I go ahead and insert my hook into this second single crochet, going under both loops here, and oops, slip stitch. There's that one. And then into the next one, slip stitch again. And so there will always be these two joining slip stitches to our sleeve. Once I do that, I just turn my work. And I'm now ready to begin the second row of my ribbing. So to do this, what you're going to do is start with a single crochet, but we're going to skip the two slip stitches that we joined to our sleeve. So you do not work into these two slip stitches ever during this part. The first stitch we find is going to be this one right here. Sorry, right there. That's going to be our first one. So just like with the previous row, we're going to start by working a single crochet to get us started. But from now on, we're going to be working into the back loop only of each stitch. So going into the back loop only of this stitch, we will work our single crochet to start. Then, working still in the back loops only, we're going to do a linked slip stitch all the way across. So we will go ahead and insert into the previous back loop that we just worked our single crochet into, pull up our loop, then we will insert our hook into the back loop of the next stitch, and slip stitch those together. And then I just repeat that again. So I insert into the chain into the back loop we just worked into to pull up my loop, then into the next one, slip stitch into that back loop. And then we do that again. Insert and pull up a loop in the previous one we just worked, then go into the next one and slip stitch. And if you work it correctly into the back loops, you'll get that nice ribbing effect where you have those nice ridges and grooves that you see on those nice, beautiful ribbed cuffs of those sweaters you might see like in the store, or you see being knitted up with those nice little ribbing. I'm just rambling when I talk about that. So yeah, so basically this is what you're going to do is just work linked slip stitches in the back loops all the way across. And then we'll make sure we want to work into that last stitch. So sometimes that single crochet can be a little hidden here on the side, but we want to make sure we work our final linked slip stitch into the back loop of that single crochet. And now you've got this nice little ridging here. And then on the opposite side, you can see that we've got the ridging here. So it's going to alternate that ridging to create that ribbing effect. So now to do the next row, what we're going to do is chain one, tighten that down, turn our work, and then we will work our linked slip stitches in the back loop only going across. So we're pretty much just repeating the row before. So into our very first stitch though, we need to make sure we just work a single crochet since there's not really anything to link it beforehand. We do our single crochet, then we can start doing our linked slip stitches by doing through the stitch we just worked and the back loop of the next one. So since that's pretty much the same, I'm just going to go ahead and work those up, and then I will meet you back about joining to the sleeve. Yeah, I've just finished working my final linked slip stitch there, and we can now see even more clearly like how this ribbing is coming out. And you can see it kind of does have that little bit of a herringbone look to it. So it matches kind of the theme of our herringbone double crochets here while still giving us that nice ribbing. So now that we've done that, all we do is basically just repeat those 2 rows over and over. So we start by slip stitching into the next 2 rows here, or sorry, the next 2 stitches here. You turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, and then into the back loop only of this first one, we work a single crochet. And then we start doing linked slip stitches all the way across. Then we chain 1, turn, and then work slip stitches all the way across, joining those 2. And then you just keep repeating that over and over and over until you've worked all the way around this sleeve. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. It takes a bit of time to be able to do all of that because you're doing a lot of back and forth and joining and turning and everything. But once you get to the end, I'll go ahead and reach back up with you or meet back up with you, and I will show you how to join your ribbing at the end here. I've just finished working my cuff all the way around. And depending on which direction you may have worked, you might wind up being like where you meet up towards the inside or you might meet up towards the outside. But regardless of whichever way you do it, one thing you're going to want to make sure you do is when we join the seam together, we're going to need to be able to join the right sides facing each other and the wrong sides are facing out. So for me, that means having to kind of turn it to where the cuff is almost flipped inside out for me to be able to join it. Then once I join it, I can flip it right side out. If you did it the other direction though, you might be able to go ahead and work the wrong sides facing outward without having to do a whole bunch of turning. Regardless of however you may need to do it, you're going to join it up together the exact same way. So once you reach around to the last stitch of your final row, what we're going to need to do is actually join into the very first single crochet of the round we've been working our joining slip stitches into, because that's going to connect the base of these 2 sets of the ribbing rows here and just make it a little bit more secure and give us kind of an anchor point to begin our joining. So I'll go ahead and work into that single crochet just with a slip stitch. And now I am ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fold my cuff inside out here just to make it a little easier on myself. And we want to make sure we don't accidentally join the cuff to our sleeve. So make sure that you keep the sleeve stitches out of the way when you do this, but we're still going to join it the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the chain that we worked this first row into, and we're going to find the back loops of the last row we worked. Now, if you're facing this direction, when you're working, like from left to right if you're left-handed, or if you ended down here and the last row is going to be this way, you're just still going to find the same thing. You'll find the back loop and this free loop, and you're going to work into those. So here we go. So to join them, you're basically just going to match stitch for stitch. So if you have like 15 stitches or 12 stitches or 18 stitches, or however many stitches you have, that's how many joining slip stitches you're going to do. So you just find kind of the first stitch of this row, which is this one right here for me. So you can see it's this chain that this first stitch was made into when I started my ribbing. Oh, there's like a cat hair stuck there. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, so in this very first chain right here, I'm going to insert my hook under that chain and then find the first stitch of my last row of ribbing here and work into the back loop of that stitch. So that's going to be the loop that's away from me. So once I insert my hook through those, I'm now under both of those. I just join with a slip stitch, so I yarn over and pull through everything on my hook. Just like that. Then I do that into the next one. Find the next chain of this row, insert my hook, find the back loop of the next stitch of the last row here, insert my hook, yarn over and slip stitch through everything. And if you find that you need to do it in steps like I just did there, where I just pulled it through the first one, then through the second one, then through the third one, you can do it like that too. You can do it in one motion or 3 separate motions. It doesn't matter, because all you're doing is just slowly joining each stitch to each other. And so that's all we do for the next ones. So we'll just find our next chain here, go into it, find the next back loop of the next stitch, join those together with a slip stitch, and keep doing that all the way down your cuff. One thing to note is that I am making my best effort to try to match stitch for stitch, but one thing I want to point out is that if you're having a hard time matching every stitch perfectly, as long as you're staying pretty aligned, you can be off by maybe 1 or 2 stitches and just kind of fudge your way through there. So if you find that like, oh, I seem to be getting extra stitches on one of these rows than I do have here, then when you work one of these, just work 2 of these together with 1 of these to kind of match them up. Just kind of like, do the best that you can. If you find that you just completely do not like the way it looks or you want it to be absolutely perfect, it's also only a little bit of stitches. It's not like a huge set of things that you can undo. So if you need to really just rip it back and start over again, feel free to do that as well. It's up to you how perfect or as close as you want this to be. So with that, I'm going to continue working up the remainder of my rows here. And there we go. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors and just snip off, fasten off a tail that we can weave in later. But notice that we've got this kind of prominent ridge right here. It kind of looks similar to the rest of these. It's just going to not be as flat. So I don't really like the way that that looks. But when you flip the collar or the cuff right side out, you can see it blends in so nicely. Like it just looks like it's a continuation of the same ridging all the way around. And then when you go through and weave this yarn tail in and just kind of secure it, then it just looks like a nice clean edge for our cuff. So once you have that done, you're done with your very first sleeve. So then all you have to do is just repeat everything that we just did with this sleeve on the opposite side of your tunic. And then once you're done with that, you'll be ready to start the final touches, which is going to be the neck trim and the bottom trim. So I'm going to go ahead and meet you up once I finish up my other sleeve and talk to you about how to do those sections. All right, just finished working up both of my sleeves. So you can see here, it looks really nice and crisp and clean with that ribbing on it. Oh, I just love the way that this looks. So once you have both of your sleeves done, it is time for us to do the finishing touches of adding trim. So there are two main places we will be adding trim to. The first is going to be around the neck area, just to kind of clean up these edges. And then the last part is going to be around the bottom, where we are going to clean up these edges as well. But the instructions for both are going to be very similar, but there are going to be a couple of differences when it comes to working into, like, around the corners and around, like, these different turning areas and whatnot, because both sides are going to have their own instructions, but they will all start pretty much the same way. You're going to find the back and locate a relatively center stitch. So it doesn't have to be precisely in the center, because we're not going to be joining and making any sort of seam or anything like that. We're just going to be working in continuous rounds for 2 rounds, and just to kind of like clean that up. And then we'll not be joining and turning, so we're just going to be continuing working in the same direction for both rounds. So I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing to do is locate a center stitch, relatively center stitch, on the back of our neck, and insert our hook into it and join with a nice slip stitch here. So we're going to pull our slip knot through, tighten that. Then we will chain 1 just to secure it to our stitch here. And then we're going to work a single crochet into that first stitch, and then work a single crochet into each stitch across this neck area. So what some people might do is, since we will be working 2 continuous rounds, they might place a stitch marker into this very first stitch, just so they know very clearly where that is. But honestly, to me, you're going to know the end on the first round, and then the second round, you're going to very clearly tell where the end is anyway. So I don't think that that stitch marker is super necessary. But if you're a person who just really needs to make sure, feel free, pop that stitch marker in there and you'll be good to go. So for this part, it's pretty easy. You're just working single crochets into each stitch. And when we get to this cable area, you're just working into the top of each of these post stitches, just in order like normal. There's no weird like crossing or anything like that. So if you just kind of look along the top, we can see that each of those stitches, just you follow the same path of these V's that you would with any stitch. Over here, they kind of get a little bit jumbly. If you just kind of stretch those out, those V's do become a little bit more visible for you to see. So just kind of work your way across those here. See, I'm kind of stretching, and I can see those stitches a lot more clearly when I stretch it out like that. And now we're about to the end here. So here's something that's going to happen. When we get to the end of the top of the neck, a little bit of stray weird fiber there. Okay, there we go. You're going to find that we need to round this kind of corner, and then we will start working into the sides of the rows going down the side of the neck. To do that, in our very last stitch of this row here, which is going to be this last V, we're going to actually work 2 single crochets. So we will work 1 single crochet to basically kind of finish up this top edge here. And then we work a second single crochet into that stitch, and that kind of pushes it over around the corner, so that when we start working into the side, it's a little bit more of a smooth turn than if we just jumped straight here into the side. All right. So now to work the size of our stitches. So each herringbone double crochet is the same height as about 2 stitches. So what you need to do is just roughly work 2 single crochets for every row. Now you can feel free at this point to work your single crochets wherever you really kind of feel like, as long as you're evenly spacing them about 2 stitches per row. And that way you don't pinch anything in or cinch anything too much, but also you're not crowding in too many stitches onto one row or anything like that. So if you just kind of guess about 2 stitches per row, you should be good. So in this first one, we've got this row that was right here. I'm going to work 2 stitches. So I'll just kind of find the stitch here that's in the side, and I'll just kind of stab into there. Just pull up a single crochet, and then into that same one I'll work another single crochet, and that gives me that nice rounded single crochet edge there. Then into this next row right here, I'm going to work 2 single crochets again. So I'll just kind of insert my hook in between those 2 stitches that were part of that decrease, if you remember from there. Work a single crochet, and then work a second single crochet into that same one. And that will do 2 single crochets for that row. And then you just keep going row by row, inserting 2 single crochets for each row. Now, if you find that you don't get exactly 2 per row, it's fine. The stitch count here doesn't really matter. You're just really polishing up the edge here. That's all we're really doing here. And as long as it looks good and looks nice, the stitch count is not going to matter at all. So you pretty much just put it where you think it's going to go well, and you're good to go. So one thing to note is that when I was working into the sides of these decrease rows, it was pretty easy to see, like, I could work in between stitches. Once you get to the sides where there's not these decreases, the stitches may be a little bit tighter to work directly into like the post of the stitch. So if you find that you need to work like, just around the post for your single crochet like this, feel free to do that. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're still getting about 2 stitches per row, and just insert them wherever it seems to work for you and your hook. And another thing you might notice is that for each of these rows, there's kind of this like bigger opening right here. That's going to be the top of the herringbone double crochet. And then you've got this tighter area right here. That's the post of that herringbone double crochet. So if you work 1 stitch into that top part, and then 1 stitch either into or around that post, that will still give you the 2 single crochets for every row. So if you need to do that, it's kind of a pattern to note as well, just to help you out. There we go. Getting close to the bottom here. And this trim, thankfully, goes pretty quickly. So it's actually like a pretty fast thing to work up. So at this point, you're pretty much nearly done. Okay, then what we're about to do is work into our final side of our herringbone double crochet rows. So we still work our 2 single crochets. And then we're now at the corner. And here we can see that that's the first stitch of these 6 stitches that were in the middle. But if I just jump from here to here, we've got a huge gap in between. So this is where, just like we did at the top, where we added an extra stitch to help us round that corner going this direction, we're going to do that same thing in this corner. So in your instructions, it's going to say you're going to then work a single crochet into the same stitch as the herringbone double crochet is coming out of. This is what it's talking about. So this stitch right here that this herringbone double crochet is kind of coming out of, that's where we're going to work our next single crochet. So we're adding a single crochet into the corner here. Then we will work 6 single crochets across the bottom of our neck, because that's just 1 in each of these stitches. So I just worked 1, then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we're on the opposite side here, where we had our joining herringbone double crochet here, where we had our beginning herringbone double crochet that we joined into this stitch. So just like on this side here, we're going to need to add an extra stitch in here to kind of round this corner. So into this stitch that this beginning herringbone double crochet was joined into, we're going to work 1 single crochet. There we go. And now we're back to the side of our herringbone double crochet rows, just on the opposite side of the neck. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did on the other side. We're just going to work 2 single crochets into the side of each row of herringbone double crochets. So that part you already know how to do. So I'm just going to work up the sides here. Oh, that one, not very cooperative. There we go. Let's just do that one. Okay, there we go. And we'll do here. Okay, I'm coming now to where I'm about to be at the corner. So remember that that's where we fastened off. So if this might be a little bit loose, you can go ahead and weave that end in. But what we're going to do is finish working 2 single crochets into the sides of those rows here. And then we'll get to this last row, work 2 single crochets into the side. Then we're needing to round a corner again. So just like we did on the other side, what we're going to do is actually work 2 single crochets into this last stitch here. Sorry, this first stitch here. So the first stitch of this row. So we're going to insert our hook into there, create our first single crochet, then work our second single crochet, and that rounds our corner there. And now the rest should be really easy to do, because now all we have left are these stitches across the rest of the neck, and then we'll be ready to meet up with our very first stitch here. So we can go ahead and just work those nice and easily. Making sure that as we work across these cables, we're being careful to make sure we're inserting into the tops of each stitch like normal. So we look for those V's, kind of stretch things out as we need to help see those. Now what we're going to do is, without any sort of joining or turning or anything like that, we are going to work a final round of what are called twisted single crochets. So what I like about this stitch is that it's a good finishing stitch, and it looks very similar to the reverse single crochet or the crab stitch, but you don't actually have to work backwards like you have to do with that stitch. So that stitch where you work backwards, I find that very difficult for myself to do. It's hard for me to keep the correct tension, and so I just never feel like it looks as polished to me. So to do this, what you're going to do is, into this very first single crochet, we're going to insert our hook, and we're going to pull up a loop like we would a normal single crochet. And normally we would go ahead and yarn over and then pull through both of these loops to finish our single crochet. But before we do that, we're actually going to just kind of stretch our loops here, and we're going to turn the hook counterclockwise. So it's going to turn the hook towards us, and we just turn that hook all the way around, and it creates this twist in our stitch. Now it's going to be kind of tight, which is why we wanted to make sure we stretched as much as we possibly could. And once we have that tight stitch there, tight twist there, that's when we're going to do our yarn over and then pull through that twisted loop. You can see there, it adds this kind of twist into the stitch and gives it kind of that almost, it'll look like a ropey kind of texture as we go. So right now, just one twisted single crochet doesn't really look like much. But once we get to the end, you'll get to see the effect that it creates. So then we go into the next stitch here, going under both loops. We're going to pull up our loop, make sure it's nice and stretched here, and then we will twist it counterclockwise. So twisting our hook towards us and then away. There we go. Then yarning over and pulling our loop through that stitch. And then we just do that into the next one. Pull up our loop, nice and stretched, twist our hook, yarn over, pull through. And now it's a little easier to see now that we've done a few stitches. It's creating that little twisted, corded rope look to it that's going to look really good once you get all the way around to the end. So what's really easy is that because we've already done like the rounded corners and things like that, you're just working one twisted single crochet into every stitch. You're not having to do any extras or decreasing or anything like that. So this final round is actually pretty easy to do once you master that twisted single crochet. So I will go ahead and work the rest of mine off camera, and then I will join you up to show you how to finish off this trim. I'm coming now to the final stitches. So I've got 2 more left here. And then in the pattern, it states that you do not actually join with the first stitch of the round. The reason for this is because there's not really a good way to join it. Even doing an invisible join, I found that it just kind of added a little bit of extra lumpiness right here that didn't quite work seamlessly. So instead, all you actually do is just fasten off at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. And then you take your yarn needle and you just simply weave this tail to secure this down to just basically look like it seamlessly goes around. And so to do that, we can see that wherever we pull this yarn determines the direction of the pull of this little twisted thing, this twisted part right here. So if we want it to go a certain way, we just make sure that the yarn is pulled and woven in that direction. So I noticed that I want it to go this way to match up how all the other ones are turned. So to do that, I'm going to insert my needle through here because that's about that direction. And then just pop it out on the other side here. Then if I pull it, you can see that it pulls that final stitch into place to make it look like it just continues that pattern without any sort of joining or seaming. Now, if you find that you try it and it doesn't quite look the way it's supposed to, you can always just take your yarn needle out, pull the yarn back out, and then try again, putting it into a different spot. But once I figure out where it's going to go, all I simply do is now just start weaving it in like I would when I'm hiding the tail. So I just kind of find some stitches here, just weave that way without tugging too hard because I want to make sure I'm not tugging so hard that this is warping this area. I want it to still look like it's supposed to. Then after that, go ahead and start weaving it in through these other stitches. And then what I like to do is kind of grab maybe one more here, just around. Go ahead and grab that one also. And then I just have it work back in the opposite direction to keep the yarn from being pulled out later whenever it's worn. There we go. And if you want to just add a little bit of extra security, you can always weave it back a third time. But I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and just fasten it off as is. And I am now done with my neck trim. And so that looks really good, just going all the way around my neck with that nice little kind of corded looking edge there. Ooh, that just looks so good. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to now move on to the hem, which is going to basically be these exact same instructions. To begin the trim around the bottom, we're going to be doing something very similar to the neck. Like I said, the really main difference is that instead of the first round being single crochets, we want the first round to actually be half double crochets to kind of give it a slightly thicker look here on the bottom. But otherwise, the instructions are pretty much going to be the same. So what we're going to do is kind of find where the center is, and then just insert our hook into this chain here. Because if we remember, this was the bottom where we started with a chain. And so we're not working directly into like the tops of stitches, but you can still work into those chains like they're stitches. So we will go ahead and get our slip knot here, pull it through for a slip stitch, and then we will chain one to secure it to our edge here. And then we will work a half double crochet into this chain. There we go. Might be a little fiddly, but that's okay. Got that. Half double crochet. Then into each of these chains going across, we're going to work a half double crochet into each one. So half double crochet, half double crochet, half double crochet. And just like with the neck, the stitch count is not really important for this as long as you get roughly 1 half double crochet per herringbone double crochet that you see along the bottom here. So we're just going to go ahead and work that all the way until we reach this corner of our hem flap. I'm coming now to the corner. And so just like with the neck trim, we're going to work 2 single crochets into the corner of our hem. So there's one, oh sorry, not 2 singles, 2 half double crochets into the corner to help us round around this edge. And then we will do exactly the same thing as we did, where we're just going to work 2 half double crochets into the sides of each row. So there's 1 and 2 for my first row. And then I can do 1 and 2 for my second row. And then the third one is 1, 2. And so you just basically keep repeating that all the way until you reach that corner where we joined the 2 hem flaps in the first place. So I'll go ahead and work these up and I'll meet you there to show you what to do. I'm coming now to the last herringbone double crochet right here. So I'm going to go ahead and work 2 half double crochets into the side. There we go. And then as you can see, we've got the other side here where we're going to start working 2 half double crochets into the sides of these herringbone double crochets. But then we have kind of this little bit of a gap here in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just work 1 herringbone double crochet to kind of cover up this gap here. So rather than working directly into this big gap here, what I'm actually going to do is go underneath it to grab an extra strand of yarn just to give it a little bit more of a thicker look. And then that will be my half double crochet. If you find that that doesn't really matter to you and you just work directly into that space, that's fine as well. The whole point of this is mostly just to make sure we get a nice rounded turn in this corner. Then after that, you just proceed to find the sides of your herringbone double crochet rows and just start working 2 half double crochets into those. And then when you get to the corner of the hem flap, you pretty much just repeat those instructions. You'll work into the side, do 2 into this stitch, do 1 along each one of these till you get to this corner. Then you'll do 2 into that corner, work along the sides here, 2 in each side. And then you'll have this corner join space again where you'll just work a half double crochet into it just to give it that rounded turn. You'll be at this corner And then you'll just work half double crochets all the way across to here. And then you don't join, you don't turn, you just immediately go into your twisted single crochet round and work it exactly the same as you did on the neck. So for the remainder of this, you pretty much have all the instructions you need to be able to finish off working the trim around the bottom of your tunic. So I'll go ahead and work that up, and then I will show you how it should look as your final result. I'm coming now to where I am working these final rows. And in your pattern, it's going to say to work until you reach this last row. Then, instead of working 2 half double crochets into the side of this row, we're actually going to do a half double crochet 3 together across this row, and then this kind of corner area, and then the row after that. Because in this corner, we're actually going to want it to lie a little bit more flat when we're wearing our tunic. And if we put too many stitches into this corner, because of how sharp this turn is, they actually kind of pooch out if you have too many. So to deal with that, we're going to do our half double crochet 3 together. So in this last row, we're not working 2 half double crochets. We're going to start by doing our yarn over, insert in around that last row, and then yarn over and pull up a loop. So that starts our half double crochet. Now, if I try to do more yarn overs to do this next part, it's going to be really like puffy, and I don't really want that. So instead, what you're going to do is just find this corner here, and you just insert your hook, grab a loop. And then you go into the side of the next row, insert your hook, grab a loop. And now that we have all these loops on our hook, we're going to just yarn over and draw all of them together. And that essentially brings them into being like just a single half double crochet, or just one half double crochet. Then after that, we start working 2 half double crochets into the sides of the remaining rows like we were doing before. And what that's done is that it's given us that place where we can later work our twisted single crochets, but when we fold this, it doesn't really pooch out very much. It does have a slight bit of that because, I mean, you're going to be wearing it, and it's going to be kind of split slightly on the side, but it's going to lie much flatter, and it's not going to ruin the silhouette of the side of our tunic here. So definitely want to make sure you do that half double crochet 3 together in this corner, the way that I showed you here. And so from now on, you pretty much just repeat those instructions. You just work 2 half double crochets into the sides of each of these herringbone double crochet rows. Work 2 half double crochets into the top of this stitch here so that you can round this corner. And then matching up about stitch for stitch is a half double crochet into each one. And you repeat over here, do 2 in the top here, work 2 along the sides. And then instead of 2 in the sides of these last ones here, you just work a half double crochet 3 together. Then you half double crochet 2 in each side, 2 half double crochets in the corner, and then we'll just half double crochet across, and you'll be right back to the beginning. And then the twisted single crochet round is exactly the same as the one for the neck trim. So you can just go back and watch that one to see how that one's done here as well. So you pretty much have everything you need at this point to be able to finish up your trim for your bottom of your tunic. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up off camera, and then I will rejoin you to show you the final result. And there we have it. You are now finished with your Runic tunic. And so it should look something like this. And then what you'll do now is go ahead and launder and block as needed. And that'll help get out some of maybe these like crease points and ridges and stuff. You can wet block it since this is a wool. And then once it dries, you'll be able to pull it off and wear it out whenever you get to that nice cold weather. You'll definitely draw some eyes, definitely have a conversation starter with whatever you might have chosen to write here on your own rune band. So I hope you had a great time making this up, and if you found this video helpful, then please give it a like, and also feel free to subscribe and tap that bell for notifications for future videos. If you also make your own version of this, you can also feel free to tag me. I would love to be able to see your work. So if you are on Instagram, you can tag me at cocky_crocheter. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.